Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast.
This is brought to you by, well, you.
If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. Today I'm joined by everyone. Look at your screen right now. Go ahead and look at your screen. If you're listening, though, I'll help you since you can't look at your screen. Don't look at your screen if you're listening to the podcast and you're driving. Don't do it. I'm only talking to people that are watching the video. All right. We have Chris and Dustin here with us as always, but special guests, Matty and Cog, the Dukes from Defining Duke. Everyone, good to see you. Good to see you out there today.
Good to see you. Good to be here. Good to be here.
All right. So I wanted to get this together for a while. It's taken a few weeks because, well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, when we get together, people really like it. So maybe we should do it more often. So I hear you out there. Here we are. Number two is that I just feel like it's a good time to catch up. We're at the kind of middle of the year, 2022. We have our respective platforms that we cover on our podcasts. And I kind of just wanted to get everyone's take and tone on the year as it is, how their machines are doing, in quotes, their machines, and how the competition's doing. It's just good to hear the Dukes talk about PlayStation on our show. I like talking about Xbox a little bit as well and all of the rest. So I hope that makes sense. Cog, I want to start with you. How is everything going? Good to see you. Looking very svelte as always. You have your Obsidian shirt on today, which is nice.
Yeah. You got to rep Obsidian. Yeah, I've been good, man. It's been interesting. For me, this year has been like, just from, at least from the Xbox perspective, it's been kind of like navigation. Okay, what are we getting? What's happening? What's going on? You know, obviously the two major news with Starfield and Redfall and adjusting to that, and then kind of like talking with Matty and then parsing out to showcase, okay, what's happening this year? What's remaining? And, you know, right now, I think my mindset from the Xbox perspective is kind of like, I may have overreacted slightly. and there's a lot of gems and a lot of things that I think they're doing from Japanese gaming and other genres that I think that I'm excited about. And I think from an eclectic standpoint of a variety of games, they're doing well. But from the AAA hashtag just one banger side, that's the deficiency. And from the PlayStation side, obviously, you know, we just saw the God of War news drop, you know, so we got that fresh, hot off the presses right now as of recording. And that's going to be a monster. That's going to be an absolute beast. So for gaming overall, I think PlayStation's having a phenomenal year, and I can't wait to see what else we got cooked up for next year. That's that delayed.
Yeah, the Ragnarok announcement was just as unceremonious as, see, when it was supposed to happen on June 30th, everyone was like, oh, maybe they got some word that they need to put a little more effort into this, but they just delayed it a week. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if they were doing that to try to out the person that was trying to leak their stuff. I don't know what their intent was with that. There's something to it, though.
Did that guy who was like the insider on Twitter get this one?
Yeah, the snitch or whatever.
Yeah, did he get this one?
He said that they were originally going to announce it on the 30th.
Oh, okay.
But not the date itself. Everyone, of course, well, not everyone, but I guess Dustin's the one who alerted me to the kind of prevailing theory that he's a YouTube employee, which does make sense to me. But Matty, since we hear your sultry voice, I'm curious how you're feeling about the year so far. How's the tone? I'm also curious about how your audience feels, because, you know, we don't really hear too much from them. We have a lot of crossover, obviously, but you have your own audience on Last Stand. So, like, how's everyone feeling? What's going on?
It's hard to gauge because last week, Cog and I had a real long chat, our longest episode in about 4 or 5, about, you know, the management of Xbox's studios, because there's just been story after story, report after report about Xbox's handoff approach kind of firing back on them in some respects. And some of the feedback last week was, on the Patreon at least, was, you guys got to chill. You're too negative. I read the YouTube comments and there's a lot of agreement with us. I think if I could put a term on where the fan base is at, I would use restless. There's really nothing to do. We're all just waiting for the next big Game Pass drop. And I think for most of us, at least me, I'm just kind of counting down to 2023. You know, we being Cog and I talked a lot about at the end of 2021, how don't pop bottles yet, as Cog would say, right? Don't pop bottles yet about 2022 being Xbox's year. Anything can happen, and PlayStation's going to come out swinging. They have, I think, PS Plus, the overhaul of that is much better than anyone could have expected. I was really impressed with it. I look at how Game Pass started and I look at how PS Plus started. It's very impressive, like how many notes they took from their competitors, including Nintendo Switch Online. But overall, I think people are very antsy and quick to react to things, and there's not really much stability in the community because there's no games to root people. We're all waiting for, again, new Game Pass drops, and there are cool things coming out, like Cog mentioned, and there's some awesome day one games like Plague Tale Requiem. I'm very excited for High on Life. That's a timed console exclusive, but overall, it's been a good backlog year for me. There was a rough review cycle to start off the year, and now we've sort of been in this gap where everything's coming out in 2023. It feels like, I remember a lot of us, myself included, were anticipating 2022 to be huge for games, and it started off that way, but we just fell off a cliff. And it looks like everything's just being pushed to 2023. We just saw Forspoken put there, even something as small as an HD collection remaster for Mega Man Battle Network. They're like, yeah, see you in 2023. So it feels like everything's being set for there. So for me, it's just been a lot of like biding our time, because even in the realm of Xbox, like that's where we're waiting for the Activision deal to close, and what's their summer showcase going to look like now when you have to manage Activision, Bethesda, and Xbox first-party studios plus third-party deals? So it's a very interesting time, but we're sort of in limbo is how I would identify it.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, we've had on our side a few more games, but I'm looking at my trophies from this year, and like nothing's really sticking out to me. Is like this game, this game that I love, because like the games I loved most this year didn't come out this year. I think I liked Ghostwire Tokyo a lot. Thought that was actually an awesome game, but I went back into the Castlevania Advance Collection. I was really disappointed with Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga. I thought it was dreadfully boring. I couldn't believe it. Really, I was just like, "What is going on here?"
Which episodes did you play? Because some of the prequel ones were like
I played
pretty bad.
episode 1 and 2 only. So
yeah, those were really bad.
I just couldn't.
It's funny. Yeah,
maybe I should go back.
The other one that's bad. Yeah, you'd probably like the original trilogy. You could see like how the game got progressively into development hell for sure.
Well, it's funny because just as an aside with that, when you can select episode 1, 4, or 7 to begin, and I'm like, I just want to get the prequels out of the way. That was like my whole mantra. But in doing that, I guess I subjected myself to the worst stuff. But I like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. It was fine. Of course, Super Perils of Baking came out, but I've been really enamored with Wild Arms, which is from 1997, and then Shredder's Revenge, which is a Game Pass game, is awesome. So, but I agree with you. It's a weird year. Although I think the best game of the year again for me so far this year is a Game Pass game. Nobody Saves the World. I think that's still my game of the year so far. Of course, I have a huge bias for the guys at Drinkbox. I've been with them for a long time. I love those dudes. But and of course they did an episode of Duke, which was awesome.
Yes,
but so no offense to them in saying this, I just don't think it's saying very much that Nobody Saves the World is my favorite game of the year so far, because I don't skip things. I don't know what it could be that comes out later. I'm not a huge God of War guy, but we'll see. And real quick, before I move on to you, Christopher, I just want to say you brought up the Nintendo Online, and I've been using it a little bit because I played Ocarina of Time for knockback on it, and then Wily Wars came to the expansion pack.
Very interested.
Yeah, it was very weird. So I downloaded the Genesis thing, and I just got to give them a shout out because this idea, I mean, these are small cartridge-based games, but packaging all of the games into the module is a really smart idea. Just saying like, no, you download everything. And I just feel like it gives you so much value off the bat without having to go look for it. I think Sony should take a page from that. But Chris, let's move on to you. I'm curious. First of all, you have COVID, so RIP.
Yeah, I'm dying.
We'll
I'm
do
dead.
the sign of the cross for you as well. But I'll do it like a priest. I won't touch myself. I'm going to do it like that. I shouldn't have said I'm going to do it like a priest. I shouldn't touch myself.
Yeah, it's probably the worst possible thing you could have said.
Wow. All right. Never mind. Sorry. I was raised Catholic. I'm sorry. I can tell those kinds of jokes, but I'm curious how you feel about the situation right now. It's 2022. See, I remember saying in 2021 that 2021 felt like 2014, that year after the console comes out and things are a little, you get you get your infamous Second Son and you get, your Dragon Age Inquisition, but generally speaking, it's a little slow. I feel like 2022, it feels like time has stood still. It doesn't feel like anything's happening, even though a lot of things are happening. So I'm curious what your take is.
It feels like Whiplash almost to me, where it's like we had that beginning of the year that was like, holy hell, what's going on? Like release after release, and they were good releases. And then like 2-3 months in, just like immediately dead. And for a while. And I'm kind of with you where like most of the games that I've played that I've really liked this year are like older games that either I skipped out on or games that I platinumed Ape Escape and I had a blast doing that. I've been playing Yakuza Like a Dragon. and I love it like way more than I thought I would.
Let Matty know. Continue.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But I feel just kind of I don't know, underwhelmed, I guess is the best way to put it, because it just felt like we had like such a good, boost in the beginning of the year. It's almost like we timed the engine rev in Mario Kart like perfect. And then we were like, here we go. And then just sort of I don't know. Like I can't even tell you the last new. Yeah. It just sort of felt like we lost the plot real quick, and then like delay after delay after delay, and obviously my beloved Forspoken is now nowhere to be seen.
They're redoing the VO and all of the writing in the next 6 months. I'm only kidding. We don't have any. I don't want to be too mean.
Move that with my freaking mind. I don't know, man. They got to unravel that from the story. I don't know. I just feel. I feel like I still feel like we've had worse years than this. I still feel like in some ways 2021 was actually kind of worse. I think what this year lacks in I guess general timing, I feel like that's kind of the problem. Is like I feel like if the best releases of this year were spread out among the year, I feel like this would have been a pretty good year still. But it was so front loaded, and so much is left kind of like hanging in the breeze that it just feels rushed or like really hastily put together. And I feel like next year is probably going to be like a crazy year, but we said that last year as well. So like, who the hell even knows?
Yeah, the bubble has to burst at some point. You're right, though, because we did have Horizon. We can't ignore Horizon, which I thought was awesome. And then Elden Ring, which doesn't resonate with me because I'm not good enough at video games to play it. Ghostwire Tokyo, I loved that game. I thought that game was, I don't know if I said anything to anyone on the show. I wrote to Pete Hines about Ghostwire Tokyo. Really? And we had a brief correspondence, because I was just like, I know you love the games that you guys market, and I know that no one seems to care about Ghostwire Tokyo. And I just wanted to like say that I thought that game was awesome. And we had a little bit of a dialogue about it, because I thought it was interesting. But things have slowed down, Chris. You're right. To the point where I'm playing like SnowRunner and shit like that. I don't even have a real license.
That's very slow.
Yeah.
I literally don't even have a real license. And I'm playing a game about driving an 18-wheeler. Can you have any idea the havoc that I could cause in a real 18-wheeler? But Dustin, let's get you involved. It's time to activate you.
Yeah.
Tony, you trying to tell me the entire orchestra, this Siberian orchestra, is trans?
Yeah.
I don't know why I have all this soprano stuff in my head right now.
Dude, it lingers there forever.
That's does.
Just how you are once you watch it.
So how are you feeling, my friend?
Yeah. Well, the two main thoughts that I have as we're like thinking back on the past year is that, and I mainly want to speak from the perspective of like by and large, like this isn't going to be true for everybody, but it's going to be true for a lot of people, is with Elden Ring, we have what is arguably one of the greatest games of all time and many people are like were blown away by this experience early on in the year. And when you have a game that is that groundbreaking, it kind of, for the rest of the year, makes everyone is going to compare the game, whether it's fair or not to compare, even whether it's open world or just even from an experiential standpoint, it's going to get compared to that. Again, I'm speaking on broad terms for a lot of people. Elden Ring, huge game, sold millions and millions of copies. And so it's been interesting to see this year where we have other open world games that will get compared to Elden Ring, and this idea of the people getting tired of the Ubisoft style open world, so to say. And from a PlayStation perspective, just kind of bring this out as we're comparing the two platforms, is that PlayStation's had a decent year, but I can't help but think that each one of their releases has had some kind of negative aspect to it. For example, Gran Turismo 7, the microtransaction and the economy of that game. A lot of that's been fixed up, but a lot of people are going to remember that game and that launch and that controversy around it. Horizon Forbidden West, not really an issue, but its closeness to Elden Ring was one of the big talking points. And now going forward, we have God of War Ragnarok, which a lot of the conversation has been around this kind of ominous, like, is it coming out? Is it not? And then also just the feedback that a lot of people had that I don't necessarily think we agree with overall, but a lot of people saying that they felt like it wasn't different enough from the original, from what we saw. And so we'll have to see when that comes out. If
they reused animations.
Right. But I think there is some argument to be made that I'm wondering if PlayStation is playing it a little too safe with some of these sequels. And I think that that's really going to be tested with God of War, because I think that overall Horizon, again, not everybody, but a lot of the consensus that I'm hearing is that this was good and even great, but it didn't really necessarily move the needle. And I think that with a new console generation, people's expectations change. So I think it's kind of going to be an interesting litmus test with God of War when that comes out.
I agree, by the way. I mean, I've been vocal that I got a bad feeling about God of War. And I'm not saying that it's going to be anything less than great. What I'm saying is that isn't the original God of War like a 95 or something on Metacritic?
Yeah, it's like referred to as like the greatest game of the last generation.
Yeah, like I just don't see that happening. And I would love to see that happen, but new director, he's never directed a game before. The game seems to be somewhat tortured. I'm very fascinated by this. I don't think people read into this the right way. They announced the game deep into COVID for 2021. So they knew what they were dealing with. Something along the line had them disrupt the game for a full year. I don't know if it was like they just needed more time to polish, they found something that didn't work, whatever the case might be, but they were feeling confident within the confines of the pandemic to announce it for 2021. It's not like they did it in February of 2020 and they're like, oh, fuck, well, COVID started and we had to delay the game. That's not the way it went. And so there's something to that. And I keep saying mid-80s on Metacritic is what I expect. And for everyone, I mean, most publishers would shit themselves if they had an 85 on Metacritic, but it's not good enough for Sony's exclusives. And so we'll see what happens there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Reminding me when this game was, as it was during was it during a PlayStation showcase or a state of play?
Yeah, I think it was in November. I think it was in a PlayStation showcase in November or October of 2020.
It was the big, here's the blowout. The console's coming out soon. Right, here's all the stuff, and they ended the showcase with like a stinger. It's like, here's a logo.
Yeah, gotcha. Right. Yeah, because I remember when I saw that, not feeling like I believed that at all.
Yeah, exactly.
No one did, I thought. So I was just making sure I remember that correctly.
No, it's true, and we have that that skeptical mindset of when we see dates. Chris is the best with it, really, because it's like when you see a date, you can just kind of sniff it out and know it's not true. And they usually do it to get pre-orders, to reach certain numbers in fiscal quarters and all that. And I totally get that. But it's interesting that they go from that to teetering a little bit, where I don't know that it was totally guaranteed this game was going to come out in November. I think that they had to kind of make some decisions and get going on it. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's awesome. But I'm not so much skeptical about the game as much as I'm skeptical about the environment it's going into, because I platinumed Horizon Forbidden West, and I will say it's probably the most AAA game I've ever played in my life. Whether or not you like those kinds of games, whether or not you're into Horizon, all that, that's all apart from it. But when you look at the character models and the animation, some of it's a little weird, it's insane. I mean, it's insane how much better it is than it used to be. And even putting those two games together. So I do think, to Dustin's point, the expectations are changing a little bit. Cog, I want to test this theory I have on you guys since you're here. A lot of people hate that I bring it up, but I'm curious about what your position, and Matty, we'll ask you too later after this, about Game Pass. I feel like the destruction of Netflix, it's not really the destruction, but really the fiscal ruin of Netflix. I mean, they're down. I mean, people have lost their shirts investing in Netflix. And I feel like it's an ominous sign for subscription models, because they require so much. And so here's my theory, is that Microsoft has bought in on a model, which might be the right model, but that they cannot reverse or go back on. So by doing so, they've said, we're going to give you all of our first and second party games. We're going to give you a nice selection of third party games and back catalog games, and you're going to pay a subscription for it. This comes at a cost because they can't sell games anymore. At least first and second party games. Very few people are going to go and buy, Halo when they can get Jesus Christ. When I went and got the Halo collection, it literally told me, like, basically, you're an idiot. Why wouldn't you just get Game Pass on the thing? Like, just get Game Pass, just get Game Pass. And I feel like they've hitched their wagon to this thing without fully understanding what it might do. I think the only reason it doesn't matter is because it's Microsoft, and it doesn't really matter if it loses money because they can take from one pot and put it into the other and make everything sustainable. But that I feel like we're going to see it come out this fall, because here's the situation Microsoft's in now. No Redfall, no Starfield. They're not going to make any revenue on those games anyway, because they're not going to really sell a la carte versions of those, especially on Xbox, maybe on PC. Now they have to go spend, I don't know what, $50 million and get a big AAA game to put in that Starfield position. Not only is that more money out the door, but that's now money that they can't get back if people go and buy that game. It seems like this, in other words, I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but this vicious cycle that puts them further and further into a corner. I'm wondering if you see that playing out as well, or if I'm just kind of crazy.
It's a good one. I mean, obviously, when me and Matty discussed the ramifications of Starfield and Redfall, both not released. To me, it's tremendous because it's two AAA first-party games that you anticipated to be part of this service to drive people to the service, right? Because if they, according to their goal, they ideally would like a quarterly cadence of releases to hit the service. And this is a huge gap. And I told people initially, I don't think they can replicate that. I don't think there's anything they can do in the short term to say, okay, let's throw in this game. Let's make a deal with the Harry Potter game, so to speak, or any of those type of games, because Sony either had the licensing rights or with the not closing of the Activision Blizzard deal, they can't really do anything with Call of Duty, as well as Sony has the marketing rights. So to me, it's a conundrum. You can't really fix that. And as the kids say, you got to take the L on this year as far as what you can put in the service. I think long term, how I look at it is they say, okay, this is where we get back into the hands-off approach, where it's like, okay, they say, I'd rather them have a situation as far as Bethesda where they take as much time necessary to make the game the best it can be, and then it's slated for 2023. But this year, according to what you're saying and with the model, I think it does hurt them. And this is where it's going to lean back into my acquisition of things. I know I get a lot of pushback for this, because my feeling is the reason why I am Duke acquisition, Lord acquisition, is because to me, there was an over-reliance. I should say over-reliance. There was a dependency for Bethesda to save them for this year, right? We know what happened with Stalker in the Ukraine. I don't blame them for that. That's the world events. I understand the pandemic is affecting development on a lot of levels on other games too, and I'm trying to be empathetic to that. But the reason why I am pro-acquisition for them is because they need content. They need studios to be able to produce content at a consistent pace. And if they had someone, say, for example, if theoretically the Activision Blizzard deal was done, you could have maybe potentially threw a couple of big games in that slot. And I just think there's just this particular year, I don't know how they could have really gotten out of it. But I think that they still need to be in an acquisition phase. They still have gaps and they need to fill. So overall, with Game Pass, the Netflix model, I think there is differences. I think it's more unlike Netflix. Like, you can download the game. You can have a copy of the game to your device. So I think there's differences there. But the thing I will say is this, and in conversations that I've had behind the scenes, as much as they have pushed the Game Pass model, right? And they are behind it. This is a part of what they do. I'm not going to minimize that. The vibe I got is that is one aspect. They recognize that there are going to be people who will not and will ever subscribe to that kind of thing. They want a physical release, or let's just be honest, with their cold cloud infrastructure thing, they're just not going to be in a position to sustain an infrastructure or network to access that stuff consistently with their vision. So they still need the retail model. They don't want to make the mistake Stadia made, which is like, you need to get in on this. You need to be a part of, our system, online only, that's it. And there's no local hardware kind of a thing. So short term, yes, they're in a bad spot for 2022. Long term, I think they'll be fine. And I do like their approach as far as Game Pass is concerned I know hardcore gamers get mad at me when I say this, but I think the diversity in lineup is the correct approach. Whether the small indies like Nobody Saves the World, I've been playing Trek to Yomi, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's tons of indie games and RTS and other games in other regions, like I'm playing the Rock of Blade Point, that are doing well, that other regions love. And that's going to be critical to the success, because if they appease to just the hardcore gamer, I think they'll be in trouble. And that's another discussion. We'll get into that. But that's my thoughts right there.
It's interesting because I think about that 2018 purchase of those 6 studios announced at E3, huge deal. And I think people can legitimately say in 2020, 2021, like, give it a little time. Like, it's still early. It's a lot to get absorbed and figure things out or whatever. But yeah, I think now is the time when people look around and ask what's going on here.
Mhm.
And I think my big question here, Matty, is, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on any of this, but just from my point of view, it's like there's such a cult of personality around some of the figures at Microsoft now, the way there used to be at Sony. The reason why there isn't a cult of personality at Sony anymore is because Sony has totally removed everyone from being visible anymore for whatever reason. I think a lot of that has to do with the power that Shuhei Yoshida and Gio Corsi and those kinds of guys developed as tastemakers. You know, Gio pulling the Vita out on of his pocket at E3 and PSX like got him in a lot of trouble. I mean, that got him in trouble at Sony for doing that. You know, because they were trying to kill Vita, and he's literally out there announcing things for it and holding it like it's a big deal instead of just it being a passive port. So I think that's why they did that. But I look at the Xbox situation and I wonder who's fucking up here. Someone is, because things aren't in order. And I wonder what you can expand on Cog's thoughts, but from my perspective, I look at it and I look at a mismanagement of some really talented studios. Dude, you guys own id, right? Tango, pretty good. I mean, you got their game out, but what happened there with losing a creative director in the middle? How did that happen? What went on here? You know,
Ikumi Nakamura, right? That was
right, exactly. Like, there's just what's going on with Bethesda. Starfield, man, I think Starfield sounds and looks awesome, but looks a little old. Like, what happened there? Like, what? So I look around and I wonder, like, who's really shepherding this thing? And I know it's Matt Booty, I guess, literally, but what's your take on all this?
Yeah, I think part of it's, figuring out when you own this many studios, right? We're talking 30 plus now. When Activision comes in, it's going to be insane. I think there's just going to be pitfalls throughout. And I don't know if it'll ever be perfect because you just don't have such a tight squad of studios to manage, and you have to let these studios be sort of self-governed. And I think that will run itself in some of them will run themselves into the ground. It's hard to really point a finger because you see the team that Xbox showed when they made the acquisition of Activision Blizzard King, and you saw like 18 different faces there with Phil Spencer at the top. And I think it's really easy to point the finger at someone like Phil or Sarah Bond, Matt Booty. And I just think ultimately it's if you will, I don't want to get too harsh on them because I just have some additional thoughts, but you could call it a collective failure. But I look at what they're doing now versus the Xbox One generation as more of a success. I do think, though, that they've definitely taken advantage of people's patience. Like, this was the year to start delivering. We got a taste of that late last year, from August till December, a new exclusive or a Xbox first party studio launch, starting with Psychonauts, ending with Halo Infinite. It was a really exciting run. As an Xbox show, it was great to have things to talk about. And people thought that was the beginning of a new era. Now we're told to wait again, and it feels like that wait is infinite. Kind of tailing off of Cog's thoughts. Yeah, actually, wow, I did not realize what I did there.
Pardon those are bars.
Tailing off of what Cog said, they're in this acquisition phase. You delay significant games like Starfield and Redfall, and I don't know if they would have tried to push them out otherwise, but because they're trying to get Activision, because without a doubt, there's more companies that are going to line up afterwards. We already see Platinum Games practically begging to be acquired. Ubisoft's open to it. Everyone's open to it because there's just so much money in the game now. Xbox has to be on their best behavior because they need content to supply Game Pass. So they need to show, like, we're not going to fuck you over if your game's in a really bad state. And so now you're in a spot where it's like, we really got to take egg on our face throughout the whole year. Like, we just have to accept that we're not going to fall into kind of what you mentioned, Colin, of like overspending at the end of the year because they've laid out the roadmap. There's not a ton of big games. I'd say the biggest game they got was A Plague Tale Requiem, which is very exciting. But, me and Cog talked about, like, what about Gotham Knights? Like, that's 4-player or 2-player co-op online. It's a DC game. Like, are they going to look at that? They clearly didn't. Midnight Suns is that one. And, it's the reality that it takes two to tango. So maybe they kick tires on those. But I'm kind of happy that they're just letting it rock. And hopefully when they start delivering, things will be solved, because I think people's patience is or lack thereof, which is understandable, starting to catch up with Xbox. And just on the notes of, because I know we were talking about at the start of this, people buying games through Game Pass, and if we're kind of, if you will, racing to the bottom. I was just, while you were talking, bringing up some stat charts because I was trying to remember if I was thinking about it correctly. And interestingly, Halo Infinite, its month of release for the MPD, which tracks physical and digital data, put Halo Infinite number 2 in December. And number 1 was Call of Duty Vanguard. 3 was Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. And 4 was Madden NFL 22. So it was in pretty good company to cap off the year. Like, people were actually buying Infinite, which is interesting because we knew the multiplayer was free to play and you're paying for the campaign, which we didn't have many details on. But to support Colin's argument, and in fairness, the next month, January, it's at 18 in the MPD. So it's a pretty significant drop month over month.
Yeah.
I'm
sorry,
sorry. It's definitely, no, I was just going to say, it's definitely a conversation worth entertaining on how consistently people are buying these things. How strong, is it just a strong sales launch and then it falls off a cliff because people are like, oh, I'll try it on Game Pass. But go on. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, I think I interrupted you. I was going to say just that I think the frustrating thing with Microsoft since the Xbox One era is just a lack of real statistics. So it's hard to, like, the thing I always respected about Nintendo is they always tell you how many copies of everything sold. They tell you, like, right down to the number, even if the game didn't sell very well.
Yeah,
and I always loved that.
Microsoft does like player counts now, and the most stats we've got on like Game Pass and spending is like subscribers spend 20% more overall. We got that. I have it up right now. That was March 22nd, 2021. So their updates on Game Pass and spending is pretty scarce, and it's why with Forza Horizon 5, Cog, you'll remember, we didn't talk about how many copies were sold. We could kind of get a gauge because people to get early access, I think it hit 1 million players before its official launch. So we knew at least 1 million players bought the game. But otherwise, they were talking like 10 million players, 15 million players. Like, they never said, yeah, it sold 2.5 million copies, but we had 15 million players. They just always talk player count. And I've always wondered about that, in fairness, is like, yes, they're saying Game Pass members are paying more money. But when they talk about something like Starfield, a single player game, Phil's always like, we want to make this Bethesda's most played game. I'm like, what does that gain necessarily? Is that because of your sheer amount of Game Pass subscribers? That means you're making a lot of money too. It's interesting. It's a very different approach from what we're accustomed to for multiple generations.
I agree. I think what I find interesting about it and why I'm so fascinated about analyzing and talking about it is because it is a cast of the die. It's a permanent choice, right? Like, you have to have Game Pass forever, and the promise of Game Pass says first and second party games. And so I look at everything that doesn't hit as just an opportunity cost that can't be filled in, or having to, again, go on the market to get something, like you said, like, whereas Gotham Knights, I'm sure Gotham Knights could be available for the right price, Yeah. And the thing about that is that they just have to sink all that money in and hope it's the right choice. I think Sony is probably pretty pleased that they're not tethered to that system. I think that they're eventually going to have to make a deeper choice than PlayStation Plus has made so far at some point, if it proves that way. But you brought up Midnight Suns, which I think is so interesting. I'm not a fan of those kinds of games, but that's a 2K game. And we do get a little bit of a hint from Strauss Zelnick in a recent interview he gave, in which he says that they're on Sony's side, basically. Like, they're like, we don't want to do the immediate day and date thing. That doesn't make sense for us. And so I wonder if we'll start to be able to figure out who's cool with it and who isn't, by who chooses to interact with it and who doesn't. And I'd be interested to know if Sony is kind of pushing back on the other end, trying to give them data and numbers, saying like, look how many copies of your games you sell here. Like, why would you ever want to do anything but this? And I'm sorry.
No, you're fantastic point. I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's all good.
I just wanted to jump in because I think that's the challenge. And I think the biggest thing for them has been the third-party day and date launching in Game Pass. And I think that is still a hurdle that they have not been able to overcome. And I saw the interview with Strauss, his data there. And I got to be honest, Matt, we've had this conversation. I feel like when you look at a company like Square Enix, and I think a lot of these third parties, they know it, whether from like almost like from a mercenary standpoint. Like, there's no need for me to necessarily give you that game, that brand new third party day and date game, when we can sell these amount of copies here on PlayStation or these other platforms, right? And then come around to you on the back end to Game Pass once engagement drops. So I think it's critical for them to kind of like get their Game Pass numbers to a point where these third parties actually feel comfortable doing it, because outside of Outriders, MLB The Show, that time MLB The Show is a special deal, obviously directly with Major League Baseball, but the Outriders deal showed that, okay, if they could do it, you could see some improvement there. But I agree. I think that's why the reliance on the first party is going to be so critical for them. And I agree with you, Colin, why they can't miss these dates. Because if you miss these dates, you got to get people in this service with quality games. So I just wanted to jump in. I see where you're going there, and I do agree with that. That's going to be their challenge.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. I love the analysis of it and the thinking about it, because it just challenges us. I mean, we at Lilymo wanted to get Super Perils on Game Pass. They didn't want it. I don't think that it's, when you look at the highest, they choose the highest, very highest quality indie games. I don't think we maybe hit that bar for them, which is fine. Still, I think above an 8 on Metacritic, so we'll take it. But we wanted to one day get involved because we would love to know, even just for our own edification, even though we would probably be NDA'd up the ass. I would just want to know for my own edification, like on background, if I can use a journalism point of view to say, like, how does this work? Because the one thing I will say about Outriders, about Nobody Saves the World and some others, is that there is this reciprocal effect probably where you go to People Can Fly or you go to Drinkbox and you ask them, like, was Game Pass a pretty effective advertisement for your game for the other side? Like, basically everyone kind of beta tests it in a sense on Xbox. I don't mean to use that terminology, but like they just get it. And then it kind of percolates outward or not. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? And then when the game finally or is available on the other platform, it could end up being a pretty interesting demo for the other side, which I think is kind of something that you can't really bake into the math. But nonetheless,
yeah,
Chris, I'm sorry. Matt.
Sorry, I won't let the sacred guys talk. I just want to say we actually pried as much as we could out of Graham Smith from Drinkbox about, putting his game day one on Game Pass. And Cog, I'm just sitting here like asking all these devs about the economics on everything. Because to me, I think that's the biggest anomaly. Is one thing that we hear often is support the devs. Like, you got to buy your games to support the devs. And kind of to my understanding is that with Nobody Saves the World, that Game Pass allowed them to be in like a safe area with the lump sum of cash they got, that they could just finish making the game, and then anything they got afterwards was sort of bonus money, if you will. So I think a reason a lot of these smaller devs are gravitating towards Game Pass, especially indies, the indie support there has been huge, is Game Pass is kind of paying for the development of these titles and letting them get past the finish line. And for many studios, probably same with Drinkbox, it's about just being able to make your next game. I'm sure, Colin, you and I can relate to that, especially like we're trying to invest in these smaller games and make them into something. You just want to make sure we can put the money back in the pool and just make the next thing. And I think that's what Game Pass is doing for some of these smaller developers, where these bigger developers, they have the chance with marketing and outreach to find a bigger audience, but they have to, maybe in the case of like Outriders, go like, all right, beta's not working out. We're not really getting anyone here. Let's do day one Game Pass. And it totally changes the narrative for the entire game. So it's definitely a case by case thing, but I thought that was just an interesting nugget to share.
No, it definitely is. And you're right. And it's also, the economics are also skewed at the very base level of indie studios. How much money did I make on Habroxia 2? $0. How much money did I make on Super Perils of Baking? $0. Everything went back into the game. I took from Twin Breaker because I was feeling a little bit more ambitious. And if I it's like I didn't take even very much from that. I think it was from our physical sales. So, and by the way, I just wanted to give a shout out to Micah, because I think it was maybe Cog earlier that was saying, talking about people buying physical games on Xbox. Micah still buys her games physically, and she gets some of the most obscure shit on Xbox where I'm like, this must be literally be the only copy of this game. And even seeing some bigger games, like I think she got Scarlet Nexus on Xbox. I'm like, wow, this must be a rare piece. Although that was a Game Pass game,
physical for Xbox would just go up in value so quickly. Yeah,
it's cool. I think that it's cool that they're getting a lot more attention, especially from Atlas now. But Chris, let's go to you. I want to stay with Xbox expertise. We always talk about PlayStation on Sacred, of course. I want to use this opportunity to talk about other things. I'm really particularly curious about what's going on with 343, and if you have any insight there, because
let's talk about it.
I just don't understand how that. I understand how this happens to games and how it happens to studios. I really have a very hard time understanding how they let it happen to that game and that studio. It's not something like out off the reservation somewhere where you're like some satellite you don't have any idea what's going on at, and you check in for your milestones and you realize it's fucked maybe somewhere down the like this is your big team.
Yeah.
Your Naughty Dog. It should be your Naughty Dog with your marquee franchise. And I just cannot believe it. And I don't I just, and this goes back all the way to the Master Chief Collection, doesn't it? I mean,
Oh
it's
yeah,
not like it
1,000,000%.
doesn't, and so it actually goes across multiple projects. It's just weird. I'm just curious, as a big Halo fan, what your take is on this, because I just feel for you guys. I mean, it just is so strange. I don't get it. I don't understand it.
Yeah, it's very confusing. There are things that I know that I probably shouldn't say, but as vague as I can be about it, they went through so many different iterations of what this thing was supposed to be. Like, a lot of pitches went into this game, and as far as I know, like, this was everybody's like, oh, this was 6 years in development. No. No, it was absolutely not. Maybe a lot of pre-production, I'm certain, but I just feel like what they did with this game is kind of the main reason why I'm so concerned about Microsoft acquiring all these studios, because I don't know where their focus is. Because if their focus is on the cadence, well, they've missed that, because this is like such a massive lull in the cadence. And if their emphasis is on quality at the sacrifice of the cadence, why wasn't this game delayed until this year? Like, it would actually have made perfect sense to delay Halo Infinite to fall of this year. Like, perfectly. Because when I heard Starfield was coming out, in 2021, I was like, no, it's not. Like, I felt like in my head, I was like, no way. Because I'm at this point now where every release date I hear is fake. Like, I know, but it's like, oh, Dead Space remake is January. It's like, oh, cool, so April. Like, that's I auto correct to like what I assume they will eventually delay to. And Starfield is like, oh, that's not happening. Redfall's new, so that was a bit more up in the air. It's like, oh, maybe that could happen. But I always felt like, why did they kneecap Forza the way they did? Like, it just felt really clumsy that they had Forza really taking over the world, like, really quickly. Like, people were playing Forza that had no reason to be playing Forza. I was playing Forza and I didn't give a shit about cars. And I probably would have continued to play Forza had Halo not surprise dropped in the same month. That was a massive kneecap to Forza. And anybody who like, oh, maybe the audiences don't interact or intersect that much, that's true. But I can tell you, Halo pulled me way the hell out of Forza right when I was getting into it. And I'm sure that's the case with a lot of other people. And I'm like, and I'm just sitting there thinking, like, maybe the cadence shouldn't be this frequent. Maybe it should just be, maybe you don't need a AAA game every goddamn month. Maybe you can actually spread things out. And maybe when you see Halo Infinite in the state that it's in, and you see Forza as your winner game that's exploding, maybe make the hard choice. Oh, boo-hoo, you don't get the anniversary. You don't hit the anniversary date. I could have dealt with that. And I think most people could deal with that. I think the problem with Microsoft right now is that they don't seem to have a clear focus on quality or cadence. And if they do, it's entirely like mixed and matched. It's like, okay, Forza hits its date and it's perfect. Halo hits its date and it's a mess, And
Sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say, they just need to adopt a Nintendo mentality in one sense, I think, which is like, when you have games stacked like they did, Nintendo, we saw them like shift Splatoon 2 and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and do what made sense for those games respectively. We'll see how they come out in the end, but it looks like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is ready. Like, if there needs to be time, you just released at that time 3 or 4 games. You fed the beast. Let Halo go.
The thing is, it's impossible. The real thing that frustrates me about Halo as a free-to-play title is how drastically they missed how important Forge is, and how important custom creation is, and how important user-generated content is for a game like that. And the fact that they were like, oh, let's just put it out without the user-generated content mode is insane. I could have told them, like, as a person who doesn't work in this industry, that like, hey, you know what? That's going to murder this game. That is going to murder this game more than anything. More than, oh, we can't play co-op campaign, big fucking deal. That is a huge problem. When you are getting into a live service environment for the first time and you don't know how to do this, you're just figuring things out. And you're like, hey, these games live and die based on their ability to kind of retain players through consistent new content. And we can't reliably pump out that content fast enough. wouldn't it be nice to have a mode that was already in previous games that did that for you, that allowed, imagine having 20 million players that first day jumping into a creation mode and making literally thousands of multiplayer maps, hundreds of game modes, so that people weren't bored. People weren't waiting on 343 for the next, like, oh, when's the next season? Oh, 6 months? Cool. Yeah. The Forge is still not out. Co-op campaign is still not out. These are base features. They knew that this game should have been delayed a year again. And I think they knew that people would be fine with it if it landed in the way that a Halo game should. And the fact that they kneecapped it that way is just baffling, because it just makes me feel like I don't know what their goal is. We see Starfield delayed, and we assume that's for quality, but like, what is their bar? Like, what is the quality bar if Infinite launched in that state after a delay? Yeah. I'm kind of led to assume that even Starfield might need to be delayed more than it is. You know what I mean?
That's fair.
Because that's the cadence, that's kind of the expectation that they've set. So it's just
what I'm sorry.
No, it's very frustrating. And it's astounding that they managed to mismanage this team for so long. I mean, the Master Chief Collection, you brought it up. They saved that way, way too late. And it's a great game now, but my God, that first year of that game was a mess. And I respect the fact that they were doing something that hasn't been done before and still hasn't really. It's a matchmaking system that matchmakes between like 7 different engines. That is super ambitious, and I get how something like that could get fucked really quick. But they put it out, and it was messed up for like a good several years. That game wasn't working.
That's what I just want to say real quick, is that this, I think, is kind of one of the embryos of the problem. If you look at it from a cultural standpoint, concurrent to what's going on with Halo Master Chief Collection is Drive Club, with Sony now a much less important game. But Evolution paid the price for that. You know,
right.
Evolution was a storied franchise that made really good games, and Sony made them fix it, laid a bunch of them off, and then shut the studio down when they didn't need them anymore. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying that like Sony was like, we don't have time for this. And I think that was a smart move. It dispersed a lot of those guys to Codemasters and other places. And I wondered if they kind of lost their opportunity at that point to say, like, this is not acceptable. We need to have done something at that point to make sure that we didn't get to this point. And that's a difference, I think, in kind of leadership structure, and why one is producing, I think, more high quality games than the other per capita.
Just interject.
Yeah, please.
I definitely hear where you're going, Colin, and Chris is on fire. Like this is my frustration, and this is the legit concern, because for me, you know, I don't look at mismanagement as a whole, you know, for all of their studios, because I just think it's inconsistent. Like you have other studios that are producing and meeting their deliverables, but there's one child that is hosting, that is basically the one of the owners of the franchise that has made Xbox what it is, and that is unacceptable. It's unacceptable that their history of not meeting deliverables. And don't get me wrong, I agree. We understand the project with Halo Master Chief Collection was ambitious. I agree. They did eventually turn it around, but this is on their watch. And now we come up to Halo Infinite, and we're in this situation where the game at its core is a good game. The multiplayer at its core is a great game. But the problem is they can't meet the live service models. They can't meet deliverables. They launched with core features missing, like Chris said. And the thing I have is, this is my concern, is I understand hands off, because you want to bring people in and let them know it's okay to be an Xbox Game Studios, because we're not going to have our tendrils on you. We're not going to force connect on you. We're not going to do all these things on you. I like that part, right? But my question is, when you have a situation where one of these studios consistently does not meet deliverables, what are the repercussions? And that's where I'm in alignment with you, Colin, because you mentioned the Drive Club story. And again, I'm not calling for people to be fired, but at the minimum, there needs to be restructuring. right? At the minimum, someone who led or who didn't lead, needs to be shifted and moved around to get and that's why when Matty challenged me, like, what do you do with 343? I said, well, at the least, I'm going to get Staten in a power position because I know he came from the glory days of when this franchise was great. And this man got off his couch. He wasn't even asked. He was so disgusted what was going on with Halo Infinite. They called him and he said, what can I do to help you? So that's where I'm at with it. And that's my thing with the hands off approach that I need to see from them in relationship to all their studios. What are the repercussions when deliverables don't hit, man?
The good news about whatever happens with Halo is that it's so important that it will always have people ready to fix it if only they are tapped, right? Like, I would be thrilled to go to Capcom and fix Mega Man. But that's not really a vital problem right now, In fact, they're doing pretty well with Mega Man. But like with Halo, I can only imagine, like, I know that Bethesda, or was it id, hired a bunch of people recently from the community and like designers from their modding community. And I'm like, this is exactly
that was Bethesda.
And I'm like, this is exactly what you should be doing. I mean, these are the people that you want to be in your studio. You have an entire cacophony of fucking people desperate to show you their work, if only you would let them. And so Halo is going to be at the very top of that pyramid forever for Xbox. And so it'll be well tended to at some point. And I agree with you, Cog, in the sense that it's easy to kind of ramp and be like, shut this thing down. These people lose their jobs, all of that. Of course, we don't want any of that. But it is interesting to see the difference in just the curt difference in repercussions for what ended up happening. Evolution was in great shape until they couldn't deliver that game. And then when they couldn't, that was the end. And by the way, they had only been purchased by Sony like less than a decade before that. So that was all sunk cost. So interesting stuff. But Dustin, I haven't heard your voice in so long.
I'm hanging.
I'm curious. So if I'm the least agnostic of us all, I'm probably the most partisan, not in terms of my analysis, but where I play. I really just like playing on PlayStation. I only breach out every so often from that position. You're kind of in the middle, but more tended towards Chris, I think, in terms of your lack of agnosticism. Curious what draws you or doesn't draw you from these particular platforms right now. And from a more agnostic point of view, I guess I'm wondering who's doing better, because we're analyzing it from the weeds, but I don't know that a lot of the stuff we're getting into, as fascinating as it is, matters to the higher end, like, just who's buying what and for what reason. Is it Game Pass, or is it the quality of the bundles? Is it like all this shit? So I'm just curious what your take is. Well,
the real answer, the side that's doing it better is Nintendo right now, more than anybody.
There you go.
But aside from that, my relationship with Xbox this generation has been really interesting, because when I first got the Series X, I was actually like way hotter on it than I expected. And I think that a lot of that was like, man, being able to check out all these games on Game Pass. That was like a fun aspect of it. But more so lately, I just wonder. So I think that it should be clear when the Halo conversation that the anger and frustration is, at least I know from probably the four of us, and Colin's kind of not really in that community. All, it's like frustration that comes from love and a deep, deep respect for this IP that we really want to see taken care of. And I got to be honest, like, I've been like incredibly frustrated with that whole situation, because I think about like what the potential was, because the core of what was there is so good. And I remember when that multiplayer first launched, it's like, oh, it's just the beta, it's the early access, the content's coming. And we wait, and then we wait, and then we wait, and it's like, it's just not there. And so right now, I feel like for me and my relationship with Xbox is kind of just like in a state of waiting, which for me is okay, just because I really am and kind of agnostic and go anywhere. But for someone that's kind of your primary platform, I feel like that's kind of unfortunate. But I'm sure that they know that at the same time. But like, I think the thing that we need to consider, but I think that is in a lot of back of the minds of a lot of people, is that it's like, just because this isn't the year, it doesn't mean that the 30 plus studios is not a force to be reckoned with in the imminent future, as early as next year. Because Colin, I think it's something that you mentioned on Sacred, is just like, if they can get that cadence right, they can have, really a nice stream of content on Game Pass. And if they can get the quality right too, like that will be something really, truly incredible. And there's a lot of stuff that I feel like it's like the potential for excitement. Like I'm thinking about like the Indiana Jones game, the or Contraband as well. Thinking about Avowed. Like there's a lot of stuff that I'm like, I think I'm going to be excited for that game, but I don't know yet.
Is it true that the Indiana Jones game is not necessarily exclusive? Did I read that somewhere?
Yeah, Jess Corden was talking about it a little bit. It seems kind of up in the air right now.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, I have no, it's not like I'm avoiding my Series X or anything like that, but I'm like thinking about like, I feel like you and I are going to have a great time at some point, you know, like we're just, I'm waiting. I'm really curious. One aspect that I'm very curious from the Xbox perspective is their renewed interest in Japanese games, because I'm really of two minds about it. And this is something I've wanted to talk to Matty about in particular. I'm kind of two minds where I almost feel like it's a losing battle, because in some ways, if you want to play Japanese games, then you already know that Xbox is not your home. Like that is not your investment. But on the other side, where I kind of see the flip side,
don't you want to go to your home? Isn't that Adam Sandler? Sorry, sorry.
No, you're good. On the flip side, what's really interesting about what they're doing is that I don't think they're trying to convince already established fans of Japanese games and JRPGs. The idea of the Persona series being on Game Pass is a way to hook new people into Japanese games, which is really cool. That's something I've thought about a lot, is like, man, Persona is already so big, but when you present it in front of millions of people that don't need to pay anything extra to check it out, that's really exciting. And one area that they can really punch Sony, which this has kind of been going away, was that Sony's the home of all these JRPGs, big and small, and they started censoring them. And that is one thing that gamers do not like.
Yeah, tell me about it.
When you see when you see games that are being censored on a PlayStation platform and not on Nintendo, that's like some red flags. And so if that continues to be the trajectory that PlayStation is going on, Xbox has a real opportunity that's like, hey, we got all the anime titties out here, and you don't need to worry about anything being censored. Like, you know what I mean?
That's free.
And it's free. The anime titties are out for everybody. So,
$1 a month. It's all it takes you to
just
buy
$1 a
right
month. Amazing value of Game Pass. But so it's one of those things. Like I said, I'm kind of like, it's a unique strategy. I don't know how it's going to pay off for them, and it's going to be an insane uphill battle, just because Sony is putting up the dollars to get the big boys. They got Final Fantasy. They're locking that down, and it's like, I can see that being frustrating from an Xbox player's perspective who loves these types of games. And so, Matty, I'm just curious if you're kind of feeling the same thing I do, as far as like this unique avenue of how they can kind of get into this niche a little bit.
Yeah.
Despite the hurdles.
Yeah. I think Game Pass is fundamental to them cracking Japan. I think that's kind of the key they've been looking for, because part of it's introducing these Japanese games to a Western audience. But the reality is, and I think we're all guilty of it at one point or another. Maybe I'm projecting, but I'll call myself out. I remember, it's funny how many JRPGs I play now, but there was a while I was like, weeb, stupid, game looks whack. And then I played, out of all games, Colin's going to crucify me, I played Final Fantasy 13-2, and I was like, hey, this shit's actually pretty awesome.
13-2?
Yeah.
13-2.
Yeah. You skipped over that. You said that like the quickest anyone's ever said the word two, and anyone's ever said it.
Moving on. So I played that, and I was like, oh, this is great, but I had to pay money for it. Now you have the option where if you're already in the subscription service and you listen to our show and you hear me raving about Danganronpa, it's like, that's on Game Pass. You can go try that out. You can see if you like it.
Yes.
Now I can tell you, go try Persona. You don't have to go consider spending money. You can go try it. And the goal is hopefully now moving into the future with Persona 6 multi-platform release is what I'm hoping for. But the problem with Xbox has really been consistency. I got trust issues with them on this side, right? They do this whole commitment to Japan. Here's Hideo Kojima announcing nothing, but we're just talking to him. here's Wo Long, here's Persona. I'm like, okay, you're speaking my language, like Team Ninja and Xbox again. Like that's Ninja Gaiden days. But then Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection rolls around. Every Legacy Collection for Mega Man was on the platform till this one. And I'm just like, what the fuck's going on? Like, how do you guys gauge this? So it's really tough to tell. I don't know what happens there, but I think what they need as a default, which is sad to say, but they just need to make it where it's like you could expect the game to be there. There doesn't have to be this unknown factor. Like with PlayStation, the reason I play so many JRPGs there, I know it's going to be on the platform. I just know it's going to be there. But with Xbox, I just go, maybe we'll see. Oh, you're there. Okay. All right. I'll come support. Like there's never that guarantee like PlayStation has. And so I think that's something that's damaging them in the West, especially is like people's, I think this is where a real desire to pay has hurt them. Their lack of support. And just to get into generations, you look at when they had their best support in Japan was during the 360 days. They had over like 1 million consoles for the 360 sold. And part of it's because they were investing in exclusives. They had a ton of them. I always mention the trifecta of Infinite Undiscovery, Lost Odyssey, Blue Dragon. Like those were 3 excellent JRPGs. 2 of them from Mistwalker, who is a studio they really should have invested in more. They let them go. Now they're making games for the Apple Arcade. So salute to them. But that was a time where JRPGs on Xbox were just as frequent as PlayStation. It was a really good time, I felt, and you saw the return on investment. So I feel like Xbox just needs to, and maybe with that commitment they did at the end of their showcase, it was that. But I think they just need to get back to being like, this is a priority to us, because when it was a priority to them, it was a priority to their players. And I think now with Game Pass, you'll see probably double that with people playing them and of course cracking the region that Sony's had such a dominant foothold on for forever. We're starting to see, I think some sites are really making a big to-do out of it, but it's definitely worth looking at and acknowledging, which is like Xbox has outsold PlayStation on multiple weeks now in hardware units. So that's I'd say a statement as to how bad it's been for Xbox. So that's even a story. But it shows that they're starting to get people's attention and people are looking at it. Specifically, the Series S has been selling more and going like, oh, okay, like this is my Game Pass machine. I can have this and my PlayStation because Series S is so affordable.
Matty, I wanted to ask you one other thing, just that I thought about this,
please.
about you talk about cracking the Japanese market. And this is something that I've thought of, is that we see this idea, like the idea in Japan, like they don't want to have all these consoles around. They're focused on mobile and stuff. And I've wondered, I'm like, you have a country like Japan, which is small enough that they can have really strong internet infrastructure all over the country for the most part, right? Is it possible that this streaming stick idea and the app on the smart TV, along with a subscription service, is something that would appeal to the Japanese market? Like, I feel like something like that, where it's just invisible. They don't need a console that's like more just like minimalist focus and just the controller and stuff like that. I wonder if that's something that would appeal to that market and could kind of be their in now. But it's hard to say. I don't know. Have you thought about that in any sort of way?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's much of the same what I was saying earlier. I just think that type of stuff is the key, is offering a lot of options to access Game Pass. Like of course I'm very biased on this because I love the Vita, I love the Steam Deck, I love the Switch, but I think Xbox is like long overdue to explore what a handheld would look like for them. I think with cloud streaming tech being on its way, you could argue the Steam Deck is that. I think they should just support that. You just want to get Game Pass on everything. So I think things like the streaming stick, I think things like a handheld device, which is, those things are big in Japan. I think that will increase their presence not only in Japan, but everywhere. But I think those two devices will be very Japanese centric. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see those more than the actual hardware consoles themselves. Cog, I don't know if you agree with that at all or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that's the approach they have to take. And I think that, look, we have to be realistic. Like, even though with the sales numbers and they're outselling, they're doing well, that's relative to what the Xbox One generation was, which was not good.
Yeah, they beat them out all right.
Oh yeah. So definitely, I think the provided the tech continues to improve and they continue to get Azure servers in locations where their proximity is not too far from the regions, then they'll be fine, because that's the key. If you can get it without the console, because let's be honest, traditionally there's smaller spaces and not everybody wants a big lunking, Series X, even though the S is very small and an attractive device. But yeah, I think that's the key, and with internet continuing to improve and broadband, if they can get those traditional games, it may not ever be like the 1-to-1 FPS latency, right? Like a Halo kind of a deal, right?
Right.
But as long as if you could get, like, think about the JRPG genre, the turn-based genre, right? That doesn't require a lot of latency. So if you get these popular franchises, and let's say Persona is that test bed, right? And you throw it in Game Pass, and now it's on their service, and now they access it. You're getting a whole bunch of people that have never experienced this genre, as well as new games in that type of genre, especially new games. That could be a huge boom for them to gain traction in these regions, and that's what they got to do. They got to continue to try to attack that approach, and it's up to them to really be aggressive with it and market the service. I don't think they do a good job with really marketing Game Pass and the value. I feel like Ancedonia always have to tell people about it. You know what I mean, kind of thing.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy because,
for example, oh, sorry, go on.
Oh no, it's kind of crazy because that's like their whole marketing push. Is Game Pass.
Because I think of like when I'm watching football, like I feel like that's a perfect time for a Game Pass commercial, and they'll put it as like a quick splash screen at the end, like also on Game Pass, in like small text at the bottom of the screen. I'm like, you need to let people know like this is a thing you should probably look into.
Yeah. The streaming stuff I wanted to speak to a little bit, because I've been dabbling in this a little bit because I've been away, and I've been streaming a couple, like I've been specifically like Yakuza Like a Dragon and Nobody Saves the World. I've been playing it kind of primarily on my phone when I'm not using the console in my friend's place. But yeah, with like JRPG stuff where it's like turn-based, it's like it's not even remotely an issue. Like it actually functions perfectly, like entirely. Like I could play the entirety of Like a Dragon on my phone without any problem. I don't think we're ever going to see really a period of time. I would be staggered if in my lifetime I saw people playing like Destiny 2 or like Halo Infinite or like Counter-Strike on stream. Like
esports.
I can't even fathom. I can't even fathom that being possible unless you're sincerely like brain damaged. But I think for the most part, like JRPGs and stuff, like turn-based RPGs, especially, and why I think that works so well for the Japanese market is because that's such a huge dearth of those games. It's like, I mean, they're getting more action oriented now, but even with the action oriented style of combat that you see in Final Fantasy VII Remake, even that's not particularly like, it's not like a Twitch reflex type. You could still get through that game with there are people who play on televisions with game mode off and it doesn't bother them. Blows my mind. I don't know how you do that. I wish to be that simple. But I think it's a good push for them. I think that streaming stick's going to be like a huge deal in places that I think people aren't really paying attention to right now.
I'm always interested, Matty, because you and I are kind of mind melding in terms of advertising, because I only watch live sports. Otherwise, I'm not getting advertised to, because I even have YouTube Premium. I'm one of those people. So like,
hell yeah.
And by the way, I fucking love YouTube Premium. All the haters out there. I watch YouTube so much, but I'm only exposed to really sports game advertisements. And it's always interesting what people feel like they need to be advertising. I'm like, we're both like, the white male American guy with some disposable money, and it's like, what do you want? And it's like, Nationwide Insurance, Kia, and Heinz ketchup. It's like, well, where is like all the shit? I don't understand. But anyway, do you guys have time to go around the horn again? Because I want to talk about PlayStation. Yeah. Okay, let's hold PlayStation's feet to the fire too, because I have a lot. In the words of Mr. Costanza, I have a lot of problems with you people. And PlayStation is in an interesting place because I feel like they're about to become something else, and we don't really know exactly what it is yet. It's like they've been pulling back this rubber band, but it's been being pulled back for like 3 years now. And really only the same select group of games have been mentioned. Most of those games are out. And there's this whole pantheon of games that they've not announced that will indicate the direction they're going in. And I think people might be a little dismayed when they see the direction that Sony's going to be going in. The reason I say that is because they expect half of their money to continue to come and that money to grow from free-to-play games. That's insanity. It's nuts. From subscriptions and free-to-play games, microtransactions, all that kind of stuff. Half or more than half of your revenue. They're not going to just let that go. They're very happy to have Fortnite, and they're very happy to host Fall Guys and all this shit. Even the games on PSVR that are pretty big. But what they really want is a game where they don't split the money with anyone. And they're going to have to throw a lot at the wall. And we know that there are 10 of them, right? We know that there are 10 of them. And they're going to be coming from first and second party partners by 2026 fiscal. And I don't really mind it. I think Sony's gotten too far away from multiplayer. I think they have a multiplayer provenance. I think that you can go back to games like Warhawk and Twisted Metal, and all of those games from the very beginning, Jet Moto, Gran Turismo, they were all multiplayer games. And then in PS2, games like SOCOM revolutionized PlayStation. I feel like they really, the last, I would say 10 years, have gotten away from that. I think Drive Club scared the shit out of them. And I think Killzone Shadowfall was, I thought, pretty good, but I thought it was like this game from the PS3 era that was on the PS4. And I think they read too much into the quality of the reception of those games and all the rest. So I think we're going to see a new PlayStation. And as an analyst and a fan of the brand, I'm excited to see it. But I really want to see what the audience thinks when they announce 8 games in the next year, and 5 of them are multiplayer and probably free to play. And so, Cog, let's go to you first. How are you feeling about PlayStation right now? What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? Speak on whatever's on your mind.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Your analysis, just previewing, just the setup of the question, and I think they're in a transitionary phase, and I always credit them for, again, when it comes to that hashtag just one, that third over the shoulder third person narrative experience that they do so well. But I do recognize that Jim and leadership, they're not happy with the position PlayStation is. They feel that the console market is niche. They want to expand, and a lot of it is this free to play. A lot of it is multiplayer, and I do think there needs to be a little bit more diversity as far as the titles. And I think the traditionalists may be surprised on where things go, especially, Chris, they got our beloved Bungie, right? So Bungie's there. It's not clearly, when we looked at the intricacies of the deal, it's not clearly just for Destiny. They're going to put them to work. They're going to utilize resources there, and Bungie's ramping up. And it's going to be live service games. There's one thing Bungie can do. You may not like Destiny, you may not like the model, you may not like the content vault, Matty. But at the end of the day, which is, I understand your position there. But at the end of the day, when it comes to how a shooter feels, first person reaction, gunplay, few do it better. Do it better.
It's damn perfect, and they know what they're doing. And I would argue that, like, I don't think anybody could sincerely argue that outside of, like, maybe MMOs, proper MMOs, I don't think there is a more undisputed king of live service than Destiny and Bungie right now. Like, they've floundered for a really long time, but they've hit a cadence in the last, like, 2 to 3 years that has been pretty damn good consistently and perfectly. It's exactly the kind of game that at this point it feels comfortable to kind of like, okay, I'll jump in and then I'll jump out, and then, I'll take a break for a little bit, and then I'll come back, and I'll be a little bit behind, but it's not going to be that much of a detriment. And it took a long time to get there, but they committed to it. They did it. They learned the lessons. And Bungie is a valuable asset to PlayStation in a way that I don't think people really comprehend. I think people assume that, they're just going to make games, and then, they'll put them on multi-platform, and then Sony can get a cut of it, and obviously like 100% of a cut on their platform. But I do think it's more than that. I do think they're going to be tapping that talent. I do think that talent is learned in this space. I also think it's going to be an interesting time for PlayStation, purely because we know that there's so many live service games in development, and we're going to see for the first time really, a lot of Sony first party games that are probably going to be kind of rough. Like, these are, I mean, we've talked about it on the show before, but these 10 games in 4 years for live service specifically, or however long the period is, this is very much a throw something at the wall and
Definitely.
hope to God that something sticks, because what they're hoping for is their Fortnite. They'll put like millions and millions of dollars in all sorts of different video games, but even if only one of them hits, that's all they need to recoup the cost and just have something completely
Very
self-sustaining. So we're going to see a very interesting PlayStation soon. We're going to see, obviously, we're going to see some stuff that doesn't pan out. And I wonder how people are going to handle that, because there will be failures. There will be games that they put out that will fall real bad, because that's the nature of live service. That's the nature of this industry and that genre. So that'll be an interesting thing to see. We've seen them dabble in multiplayer recently as well, with obviously Ghost of Tsushima and that fantastic little free expansion that they put out for that. And that
Iki Island, yeah.
And that was,
you mean the multiplayer
Legends.
Legends,
right.
Ghost of Tsushima Legends, and I was like, this is fun. It's not. You could tell there's not enough meat there for its own unique thing, but you could tell that they're starting to think in that way, in the multiplayer mindset, and they have to, because that is becoming now the big thing. I think it always has been, in fairness, but I think lately, especially with crossplay and free to play and just streaming and all of this stuff, multiplayer is way bigger now than I think it ever has been, and they'd be wise to jump on that. And having Bungie there is huge.
Yeah. Just to finish my point, I just was going to say that totally agree, and I think that you're going to see some different approaches there. I'm very curious to see with that multiplayer approach, how they integrate into the PlayStation Premium service. Will games of that ilk hit day and date? Maybe not the God of Wars and things of that nature, but maybe that's the approach they take. Also, their engagement with PC. We've told a lot of people, get ready. There's money on the table there, right? That Sony can utilize and leverage, and they're gonna take the best out of it. They're seeing the success, So I'm gonna like, when I saw Nixis as an acquisition, I'm like, okay, they're dead serious about this.
Yeah.
This is a direction they are clearly
Yeah, they've created
going
a pipeline for themselves just for that very specific reason. Yep, you're right.
And I got a lot of pushback, and ILP and traditionalists, it'll never happen. Like, unfortunately, this is a business for some people.
It was always going to happen.
That's another.
Yeah, Chris, I know you're ready.
No, that's another way that it's changing too. It's like PlayStation never come to PC. There's so many tweets that you could see from like ages ago, like that have aged terribly. It's like Last of Us will never be on PC, and things like that. And we've even seen the cadence of that from PlayStation to PC shorten drastically. Returnal, I think, is announced, right, as well?
Yeah, Returnal. Did they announce? Well, it's in the leak. I don't know if they announced it, but it's in the leak. Yeah.
I mean,
it's announced.
So, like, and even just Spider-Man with like 4 years. Obviously, there's some weird stuff with like where the hell is Bloodborne really? But I mean, that's going to shorten too. Like, I think we're going to see there could be potential of maybe these games coming out way, way quicker on PC. Yeah. Like maybe a year, maybe less. Like that's not impossible anymore.
I look at Elden Ring and I look at the zeitgeist when that was on all platforms.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes you can't miss that, right? I'm very curious to see again how they leverage that, because we do know, yes, the base is, very sensitive to certain things, but it comes down to money, and they're doing really well with those type of releases. So that's ultimately what I was going to finish up on saying.
I was just going to ask real quick, is the expectation that these service games, are they to be exclusive? Because obviously player base is everything for these.
I think they're assumed to be PC and PlayStation 5. But
I just wanted to check real quick.
Yeah, Cog, I don't want to interrupt you if you have a finishing. You're going to have it.
Yeah, that's just pretty much it. Like it's pretty much I'm in alignment with you on there's going to be a shift and we're going to see some different things and we're going to see a change. And I'm just curious, obviously, the quality aspect, what all these other games they have in the pipeline, the multiplayer aspect, the PC aspect, and then how does the PlayStation Premium service, how does that continue to evolve with their long-term goals? And yeah, that's pretty much it for me as far as that's concerned.
I think that there's, well, first of all, and it's redundant to Sacred Symbols listeners, but just to introduce it to the conversation, Sony expects to make 4 times more money this year than last on PC releases. Mm-hmm. We have no idea where that money is coming from, except for maybe some ports of Spider-Man and other things. So there are big things planned. I would assume day and date releases. Spider-Man's obviously going to be big. I don't know if you guys have seen the videos that have been tweeted at me recently from God of War, where they put the Simpsons characters in the God of War. But making me
yeah.
I was dying. I was like, this is
hilarious.
So Chris has brought up in the past. I mean, I'm not a PC guy, but just the shit in Spider-Man is probably going to be insane and completely insane.
Yeah.
And so I just think there's a lot of potential there, and I think we're going to see some day and date kind of stuff. But it's interesting because I wonder if there was a canary in the coal mine with The Last of Us Part 2. One of the things that I didn't really talk about, but I noticed and I thought it was kind of weird, was when they announced Part 1 coming to PS5 and PC, they said, we're also proud to announce that The Last of Us Part 2 has surpassed 10 million copies sold. And part of me was like, what? That's all?
Yeah, I said
That's
the same
one
thing.
in-
It seemed
that-
lower.
Yeah, I was like, that's 1 in 12 PS4 owners. This is a marquee game from your biggest team, and they only sold 10 million copies. I'm like, that's not good. And that's great for Sucker Punch or Bend. I mean, and that's no offense. I don't mean that as an offensive thing to them. Like the lower tier studios are expected to sell less. Your Gorillas, your Insomniacs, your Naughty Dogs can't be selling 10 million copies of your games because these are supposed to be the tent poles. And I was really surprised by that. And so I wonder if there's also a kind of just a canary in the coal mine of them seeing that, years ago. I mean, those numbers are bubbling. That's after sales in 2 years, right? Of sales. And so they look at that and they're like, shit, man, like, we got to really start investing in other things. We can always produce this kind of stuff. We'll always be known for it, hopefully. But there's no hurt in us reviving, say, SOCOM at Gorilla. That's always been my theory. Yeah. So, Matty, let's get you involved in the conversation. Do you have any thoughts on PlayStation's status right now? I'm curious how you feel they're doing. And are you as hard on them as we've been on the show, just in the sense that the silence is exciting for us because I love the tension. It's like Willy Wonka. Like, I hope it lasts, right? Like, I love that tension. But I could see you being on the outside and being like, man, where the fuck are the games? Like, and not even the releases, but what's the future tell me? $500 isn't a little investment, dude. So at least with Game Pass, they have the promise of a catalog of selections by investing in that. So I'm just curious if you how you feel about PlayStation right now.
They got to stop playing games, man. What they did to Sly Cooper this past week, we need to talk about it. Come on. No
Wait,
one's
what
working
happened?
on Sly. They just
you ain't here?
no one's working on
Oh yeah,
Sly.
so to catch everyone up, Sucker Punch released a letter. It was, I think, specifically about them moving Infamous 2 user-generated content to a new server and how they would eventually be taking it down. And then they kind of buried in this statement, no one, we love these old games, but we're not working on Infamous or Sly Cooper, and no one else is either, basically. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to get
totally fine. So, they're not working on my man Sly, the best PlayStation IP, the highest seller. It's not coming back. But they got KOTOR remake. So they're playing games with my heart, man. They got my favorite game of all time being remade exclusively on their platform alongside PC. That's exciting. I'm very keen to see where they go because for me, I'm excited for PlayStation in the sense that I think now they've reached a point where, they are so well known for, as Cog said, the third person open world games. And I'm excited to see them do other things. I think there's so much, in a day and age where like nostalgia is everything, there's so many old IP that PlayStation can tap into. They have a tremendous legacy, and we're starting to see them do things with shows, and one of them's like Twisted Metal, and I'm like, maybe bring that back would be kind of different. Maybe they saw what happened with Destruction All Stars, so it was like maybe vehicles crashing into each other is not something we want to do.
Yeah, what's the rumor about that Lucid was making it and then Firesprite ended up taking it over or something because of the reception to Destruction All Stars, because they are percolating, I think, on a Twisted Metal project of some sort, which would be a great live service game, but we'll see.
I just think there's things in their DNA that kind of match what they're doing today that they're known for. Like, again, we talk about third person open world, and I think of SOCOM right away. I'm like, that was already third person. The levels were becoming more and more sprawling. The idea of kind of having this punchback to, of all games, like Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands, a game I find incredibly boring, but SOCOM with its strategic nature is extremely, like, that would be very compelling to me. Like a squad-based open-world shooter, just based off SOCOM. I feel like that's one they let go during the PS3 generation, because I remember, I think it was SOCOM 4, they made like more of an action-oriented third-person shooter.
Yeah, but remember, it also came out, and then 2 days later, the PlayStation Network went out for 2 months.
Oh yes.
So SOCOM, because they were gonna do a SOCOM 5 and it never got off for PS4 and it never got off the ground because Zipper was kind of
Yes.
fucked after that. Then they
Yes.
made Unit 13 and then they got shut down. So that was.
That is so
Unit 13 was
unfair.
underrated.
But I, Maddie, to kick it back to you, the conventional wisdom was that SOCOM was past its prime by the time SOCOM 4 came out in 2011. I think that was so.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It's like you see, I brought up Warhawk before, but it's like, oh, you want a Battlefield type game? You got like, you can do Warhawk. You want like a kind of more strategical, tactical game? You got SOCOM. And like a Halo type sci-fi shooter, Resistance.
Yeah.
You want like a more grounded shooter? Oh, Killzone. Like, I don't know, man.
I think
it's exciting, but it's frustrating because we don't know.
Exactly, but I think what's exciting about it is if they want to go make something that fits a particular need, they have legacy that addresses that, where that's one of Xbox's kind of greater flaws is like, we need a fighting game. And it's like, well, you had Killer Instinct, you have a team that wanted to work on it, you didn't do anything about it. There's things that they have to go out of their way to make. They didn't have a just one type of game, as Cog would put it. So they're seemingly putting Compulsion Games on that task, and they're making that style of game. They
Where's my Phantom Dust, huh?
Yeah.
Where'd that go?
That's a whole thing, man. And so I just feel like there's tons of games that PlayStation has that they could tap into, and that's what's exciting about it. But I'm also a little bit worried if I, because I see them moving into the subscription service game, and I think their players are happy, thrilled to pay for their games. And it reminds me of how some Xbox fans are, where they're like practically begging Microsoft to raise the price of Game Pass for whatever reason. Where PlayStation fans are just like, yeah, we'll pay 70, but PlayStation ends up, overhauling PlayStation Plus. I think it comes out really well. But as someone who's like a game collector, I worry about the monetization of classic games and the page of the Nintendo playbook that they took that one out of, because now you see what Nintendo's doing, where they had Virtual Console, this like slam dunk of an alternative for those who wanted to move on to the next generation, consolidate their collection, have all their games accessible. And they're like, no, we're going to milk you out for month after month after month with subscription fees, keep you hooked to the service, and gradually add these things in instead of doing it all at once. And I see PlayStation kind of walking that path of, we're going to drop games every month into this classic service. And I know they've made some of them purchasable separately, if I do remember.
Yeah, I bought Wild Arms, but you like can't buy. They release Super Stardust portable, and that's only on the service.
Yeah,
so it depends on the game.
Yeah, I can see some snags there, but that's a good thing that they're offering. It's just they're kind of in this. I think, Colin, you put it really well, that they're just in the middle of this change that we're seeing, and it's funny because they were the top dog. So you thought, if anything, they would sort of sit back, relax, possibly regress, but instead maybe they see what I view is like, see what Microsoft's doing and are trying to get ahead of the curve so that Microsoft doesn't leapfrog them in a year or two when they start getting their games out and the momentum changes, because gamers got short-term memory. So they'll suddenly be pro Xbox when they were pro PlayStation like a couple of days ago. And something like Game Pass, for example, that's not an infrastructure you set up overnight. Like, you need to have that ready to go. And if they need to pull the trigger on like, okay, we need to do exclusives day and date, like they can't just snap their fingers and do it. It's why I think Jim Ryan said in 2020 in like an interview with a Russian outlet, he was like, we have a competitor for Game Pass and we're just getting it now, because these types of things take a while to come around. So they're definitely in the midst of some change, and some of it I think is smart, like their investment in exclusivity. I think that's still a good game to play for them. I think it's wise. Final Fantasy, like, you want to talk about hitting Xbox in the kneecaps. Like, you got the big, they may get every other JRPG around it, but you can't get the biggest one now. And that's what PlayStation's always been good at, is like, think about when they dipped out, right? You got Final Fantasy 13, the whole trilogy, which not a lot of people like. You got 15. And when PlayStation comes in is when you get like 7 remake, 16, 14's back, and it's doing better than ever. Now they've got the sequel, the Final Fantasy 7 remake in Rebirth. So they've just, as Cog and I have said, probably the best thing I think PlayStation has in their pocket right now is their ability to like put their finger on the pulse of pop culture and be like,
yes,
Star Wars, let's get KOTOR. Which, by the way, makes Xbox look foolish. Again, I had it on good authority that they were involved in that and they've pulled out on it, which was stupid. But that PlayStation was wise enough to make that deal, or make the deal for Spider-Man when Xbox was approached about it and was not willing, which I think was good that they didn't do it, because it probably would have turned out horrendous. But PlayStation's always been opportunistic on that. And I think if they don't lose that they'll be just fine.
They'll be
Because that's
fine,
been
yeah.
that's been their major key. It's just knowing when the right time to pull the trigger is.
Just to jump on what you're saying, Matty, because that's what I agree. I forgot to mention was that I do feel with the strategic use of time exclusive, that to me is the ultimate counterpunch sometimes to Game Pass to getting it day and date. Because you look at something like a Final Fantasy VII remake, that's the game. That's the game Xbox game players want to play. And I think they're very good. I don't know what department it is, Colin, but they're very good at knowing what the pulse of the game culture is and what could be the next big thing and attaching their brand to it. And I think Microsoft has to really play catch up with that, because whether it be pop culture or whatever, they really know what potentially could be the next best thing, even to something as small as like Fall Guys, right? I mean, it was on PlayStation a while ago. I remember we covered that game at RP at PAX, and someone internally must have recognized, hey, this could be big. Let's get this exclusivity. I look at Sifu. I love Sifu. You know what I mean? I'm like, damn, Microsoft, like they just lost to the trigger. So I think that's going to be key for them, making those strategic exclusivity marketing even if it's not exclusivity, marketing deals where you think it's synonymous with the PlayStation brand. And that to me does a lot of damage to Xbox, because Xbox players say, hey, where are we getting that? And it's like, no, you either that or people think it's associated exclusive to PlayStation.
Yeah, Xbox is weird about that, because they're just like the bets that they make on legacy IP are very confusing to me. Like when Sony was like, yeah, Spider-Man, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Avengers is huge right now. Marvel is huge right now. What's Xbox doing? It's like, oh, Indiana Jones.
Right?
Let's be real. Look, I got no idea. I got no idea if that game's gonna be good or not. It might be fantastic. It's machine games.
It's machine games.
It could be awesome, but like that's an interesting bet to make. You know what I mean? Like Indiana Jones in 2022.
Yeah, especially when you see literally studios that have yet to produce a game. They have like talent, but I look at like Skydance and they're like netting a Star Wars game and a Marvel game before they've even fucking put anything out. And like Xbox is like, Indiana Jones. I like indie, but I'm just like, man, you know, what's the gauge here on what's popping right now? Like, you're not going to charge the comeback of Indiana Jones with your one game.
What's funny about Spider-Man, I don't know if you guys are, I think I've said this theory in the past when that information came out about Spider-Man kind of potentially being pitched to Microsoft and all of that, is that they could have potentially had what would be a similar or near identical version of the game, because Insomniac probably would have ended up making the game. The heart of Spider-Man, and you can talk to the developers, is Sunset Overdrive. That's the heart of the game. Like that's where the whole idea came from. And so you could imagine a situation where Microsoft got involved and there would be some different things going on and they would have produced it differently, but the same team could have potentially made it. And so you can imagine that iconic game from 2018 on Xbox and how different that would have been, not only for the two sides in this economic battle, but also for the tie-in to the movie and really Sony's very intimate association with Spider-Man, all things Spider-Man, animated and all the rest too. So, Chris, how are you feeling about everything? My whole theory is just like, we're driving down the street, down a road, a country road, and there's a beautiful horizon, but we don't really know if when we get to the horizon, if we're going to bust through a matte painting and it's a fucking chaotic post-apocalypse on the other side. We simply know that we're going and it looks pretty good right now. We don't really know what's on the other side, but I'm driving forward pretty confidently that that's not a matte painting. It's just going to look a little different. Like it's gonna, the hue of the sky is going to be a little different. You're going to see some trees that are trees, but you've never seen that version of a tree before. And I like, and you're gonna see snow where maybe there shouldn't be snow and shit like that, but you'll recognize it all as being generally grounded in reality.
Yeah. So complete environmental turmoil.
Right, exactly. But it could be a matte painting, and it could be Days Gone on the other side, and the freakers. All right.
That was a really fascinating lead-in. But I think. Ultimately, I feel like I'm excited for what's going to happen. I feel like I am going to enjoy whatever the hell is on the other side, because I kind of like the chaotic. I like the idea of like, Sea of Thieves comes out and it's a mess, and then like a year later it's a fucking darling and it's fantastic. I like the idea that Sony is kind of entering this kind of very, very experimental phase for them, where they probably can't rest on the laurels that they've been resting on for a while. I have the same feeling that you do about God of War, except maybe it's, and again, it's like, not that it's going to be bad, but that I think people are going to be a lot softer on it because it's not the surprise that 2018 was. And I feel like even if you want more God of War, I think you're going to end up being satisfied, but not blown away like you were. And I feel like people are going to wonder, like, oh, when's that going to happen again? Because we've just got a bunch of sequels now. We've got, like, Last of Us Part 1 again, which is not a huge deal, in my opinion. Horizon Forbidden West, which was like a better sequel, but it was still grounded in what came before. We're going to see a lot of experimentation from Sony because I think they see that they can't do the same thing over and over again. Like, I don't think we're going to get God of War Ragnarok 2. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we're going to get another one, at least for a long time. And if we do get another God of War, I think it's going to be shockingly different from whatever.
Well, yeah, they said this was the end of the Norse saga. So I think that was
Yeah.
them telling us that they're going to go away now after that.
Yeah, which is wise.
I agree.
I don't think it's smart to spend 10 plus years working on 2 games in the same series. But I think, whatever's on the other side is just exciting. But I do think that a lot of people who are used to the way the PlayStation has operated and has consistently operated for a while now are probably not going to be super happy. I think there's going to be a lot of consternation in the community of people who are very rooted in this platform, because I don't think they're prepared to see Sony, Interactive Entertainment or whatever, PlayStation Studios, come before a game that doesn't look like a fucking movie. I think that's going to be culture shock a little bit, where it's going to be like, what the hell is this Fall Guys first person shooter, whatever the hell they're making, So what is this NFT X Defiant game that they're working on?
Oh man.
We'll see what the hell happens, but I'm pumped about it because I just like I like when I have no idea.
I wish X Defiant was a PlayStation game, just because I would love to see the PlayStation fans, like fanboys, try to hype that one up.
Yeah.
Yes! That would have been, that's a fun mental exercise. Be like, X Defiant, yeah!
The mental gymnastics.
We know how some of you are. It's okay.
We know how they go.
Dustin, my silent child, I'm curious how you feel about everything with PlayStation right now, and are you feeling positive? Are you feeling negative? I think it should be stated, and we said it earlier in the show, because we kind of forget. We're always on to the next thing. There was a satiation period early in the year. Elden Ring's a big deal. Horizon's a big deal. And I would say Ghostwire Tokyo is less of a big deal, but it's still exclusive to the console. And
there were also a lot of smaller stuff. There's a lot of smaller stuff.
And Fernax came out. That was pretty cool. Sifu.
Fernax is great. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I feel like the identification of saying, and I think Chris is the one that said it, like, it's just more recently been so extra dry that it makes it all, like, your memory it's like an oasis. Like, you can't even remember the past when it wasn't dry. And I think we're in that sort of situation right now, although maybe less for 3 of you. The Cog and I can remember, like, I always remember the GameCube era, when there would be like a game on May 18th. And then you wouldn't get another GameCube game until like August 20th or something like that. And it was like literally that was the cadence. We don't want to go back to those days, but it does feel a little strange. So I'm just curious,
So
how are you feeling about
imagination? Okay,
I'm sorry?
No, so it wasn't my imagination that the games just came out way less often when I was a kid. I thought I just didn't have money, and I knew
no.
nothing at all.
I was I was a freelancer at IGN, as people know, but one of the things I did for like an X amount of money, I think it was like $200 a month, I just got like on top of everything, is I had to go into the database and do like all of the integer editing for all of the release dates. And I would have like all of the websites up and press releases and magazines, and I would have to just do that. So I eventually, like, I have to say, that's probably why I have this weird encyclopedic memory of when games came out, is probably a touch of that good old fashioned Colin autism, but also definitely a lot of playing with the numbers in the back end of IGN. So, but yeah, that those days did exist, and that was a whole thing. It was so weird. There would be weeks where games didn't come to any platform. We're not in that situation anymore, so I don't want to be dramatic, but I guess like we've been saying, our expectations have changed. God of War is entering a different environment of expectations. So too have our expectations of what will happen next. I'm wondering how you feel. Are you trepidatious or confident?
I'm honestly concerned, probably more than I'm positive, about the future of PlayStation. And I think it comes down to changing of the guard that we saw at the end of the PlayStation 4 generation and the trajectory that really Jim Ryan has put us on. And I don't want to just completely, it's not like it's been unsuccessful, but the much more, I don't know, is commercial focus the right way to put it? The pure, like, okay, well, let's focus on big IPs almost exclusively. Japan studio, you're out completely. And we're going to use all of our IPs and make them big mega franchises with Netflix and movie deals. And all along the way, we're going to nickel and dime our established fan base with $10 upgrades and mixed messaging and complete and total fuck ups of Sony PR, literally just forgetting that Jim Ryan would say that the upgrade would be free for Horizon. Like, just completely forgot. In one ear, out the other, made a whole mess where they had to go back, and then it's like, well, the PS5 disc is $70, but you can buy the PS4 disc for $60 and get the
I
upgrade
did that,
for free.
and then they wouldn't let you pre-download it. That was like the petty thing they did at the back end. It was like you couldn't upgrade it until it was out.
Right. It's so, and then like I said, the focus on the major IPs, it's one of those things from a business perspective. It's like, yeah, maybe the remake of Medieval isn't necessarily the right move, but it's like one that's like for your core fan base, the smaller stuff. And it's hard because you can't put a dollar amount on some of those smaller. I mean, you can literally put a dollar amount, but you can't. There's something about building that core community that I think that they've lost. Think about the PlayStation experience era of PlayStation, where it's not necessarily an event that makes you money, but it invigorates your core fan base, which not only do they go out and buy your products, but they tell all of their friends and they convince people around them that it's like, yeah, this is where you need to play. And to see them kind of just really double down on the stuff we already have, and where we do see them experimenting is in this free-to-play area where it's kind of like, let's just, I mean, I don't want to go too hard because we have to wait and see what these projects are. But right now, from what we're hearing, it sounds like let's just throw everything at the wall and hopefully one of them sticks, right? And to me, that's just, it doesn't feel like a satisfying, like, so we're just going to just see what happens. And eventually, hopefully you get your Fortnite after maybe people either you have smaller communities that get invested in something that doesn't work, or just something that it's like, well, this was a waste of time for everybody involved. So it's weird because Sony is a big corporation. So yes, they're money focused. They always have been, but there's this shift away from, it's hard for me to even put it into words. Cause like, clearly there's a lot of craftsmanship and like the idea of like making these amazing, huge games. But it's like, I miss the smaller stuff, the stuff that really added vibrancy to their lineup. And to see them take a more maximalist approach, what's going to make us the max amount of money? What's going to be able to give us the most amount of brand recognition with our IPs feels concerning in some ways.
Yeah.
And I don't even know like if it's necessarily fully concerning. It's not like, I feel like it'll probably work out for them, but it's disappointing for me as someone who likes that smaller stuff and who has concerns about, it's like, okay, a Twisted Metal show on Peacock. Like, it's like, I don't know. Again, we have to wait and see, but some of these moves, I'm just like, what's that?
Is anyone subscribed to Peacock?
I was to watch Battlestar Galactica, and then I unsubscribed. That was
it feels like it's that type of service. I think actually I remember now. Now I know why I asked, because my girlfriend subscribed to it so we could watch Harry Potter. And then we unsubscribed, so.
Yeah.
It's so annoying how it's just turned into this disaster of it's exactly what we hated. It's exactly the same thing. We're just now we don't pay one person to do it all for us. Now we have to do it all ourselves. Brilliant. Yeah. Absolutely. We were all very brilliant. We all knew exactly what we wanted. Well, Dustin, I totally agree that there's something foreboding about it. And it's been a long time. Like, it's funny because there were games that towards the tail end of that kind of era where PlayStation was incubating interesting small products as a second party, especially out of Santa Monica. They released that game Bound, which was that random game where you were like a ballerina almost, which was interesting. And Medieval was kind of really one of the last games along that line. And I think we're going to get more of the AAA indie shit now from Asobo or whatever they're called. Or what is it? Asobi? Asobi.
Yeah.
Asobo. What is Asobo? That's a word. Or is that is Asobo the dude in Double Dragon?
Adobo.
Okay. Adobo. That's what it is.
Adobo is a seasoning.
Okay. So that's what that is. Yeah. So now we've got it all. Now we've got it all mixed up. And there are these other kinds of games where they kind of just slowly shit them out. And Pixel Opus will probably have that like AAA indie thing going with whatever they announce. But generally speaking, I think we're going to be lacking on that stuff. And they have taken the maximalist approach. But I am of the mind that I've always been of the mind consistently that them getting on PC is very smart and that they should be getting that stuff on PC as soon as possible. You've gotten your people. I don't know that anyone's going to really be lured over to console if they've not yet been lured over to console, especially with your older stuff. So just sell. That's just free money. That manufactures money. When Horizon sells 1 million copies on Steam, that's just free revenue. That's like $40 million or $50 million just in your pocket for no reason. You didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So you do that a couple times and you have the AAA budget to make another of these games and so on and so forth. So I think the bigger shock to the system is going to be the inevitable, and I think inevitability of these games, some of these games coming to Xbox, whether they come immediately or, over time, wouldn't be surprised by that at all. MLB The Show would have been one of the last games I would have said would have come over. Of course, they are getting their arm bent by an outside force. But when you see that kind of thing happening, and that's now years old, I mean, it's not a surprise anymore. That was announced in 2019. It's like, well, anything's possible. So I want to just go around one more time quick and just get what your most anticipated game is. We don't really do this kind of around the horn stuff on the show, so it's fun to do it with all of us together. Cog, I'm curious, what's your most anticipated game? And by the way, shout out to the Obsidian shirt again. I really liked that medieval mystery game that they showed up. Yeah, that game looks kind of cool. See, that's
coming around.
That's kind of like that's the kind of experimental shit I think Dustin's talking about. You would never see that.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
That would never ever come out of this PlayStation Studios. It would have come out of PS3 era or early, like Tokyo Jungle PS3 era. That's where you would have gotten that kind of game. So, what's your most anticipated game for any platform?
For this, it's still Starfield. Starfield will still be number one for me. Just the sheer scope of what they're trying to do, and now as Matty's got more information, it's leaning into some Mass Effect tropes with crew members and certain aspects that I'm learning. So that will always be. As far as this year, probably going to round out. I'm a big turn-based guys. Midnight Suns, I'm still got my eye on. Obsidian, I'm always rock with them. I was hard on Pentiment because it wasn't what I expected at first. I thought it was going to be something completely different. But as I learn more, and it's Josh Sawyer, and I can't be disrespectful. And I'm a huge Disco Elysium fan. So if it's any in that vein, I'm definitely going to like it. I know I'm going to love it, and I love the time period and what it means. I think it's like getting off the layer, right, of Pentiment, something like that, to see what's kind of underneath. So I'm very curious to explore that. So that's probably the ones that I'm the most excited about. I'm obviously from God of War, Harry Potter. That looks really good. So those are probably for this year what I'm most. But ultimately, number one is still Starfield. I'm a sci-fi space guy at heart. So it hits the button, but I just need them to execute. And I'm glad they're taking their time. Take your time, work on your frame rate, fix your issues, because your scope is grand. And I did ultimately feel that was the right decision to delay.
Just a quick postscript. Are you concerned about the scope? To me, that was a huge turnoff when I heard that, like the 1,000 worlds. I was like, what? Because there's a specific thing that happens. You guys have talked about this ad nauseum. We don't talk about it at all on the show, but there's a specific shot where they're pulling out from the map and it almost looks like a Mass Effect style system map. And they do that once. And I was like, oh, sick. You'll be able to like explore this system very thoroughly. That seems like a reasonable thing with someone with I don't know if it's subliminal, but probably light speed travel. They can get around from place to place and they can kind of explore it in their life. It feels realistic. But then so I was like, that's cool. I like that. But then when it got to this thing that was further out, but then they're saying you can land on all these places. And I'm like, oh, no. Because the way I love Mass Effect 2 and the way that Mass Effect gave like depth to the world, I thought was really clever. You can go to these places. You might be able to land on one place and find something, but you might find a Prothean ruin, or there might be a side quest. But you can read about them and learn about them, and I loved that. I nerded the fuck out over those indices. So do you have any concern about that? Because I just feel like that kind of depersonalizes the game in a way. How the fuck could one pilot see 1,000 planets? It doesn't even feel like their games are all about seeing like, this is you. And I loved Fallout 3 because it was like the wasteland. When you left the wasteland and you went to Point Lookout, it felt like, wow, this is like a lifetime event. I'm going to the pit. I'm like going somewhere, and it's like a big thing I'm always going to remember. But this feels so big, and I don't know that turned me off.
No, I hear where you go, and I understand the concern. The concern is legitimate. What we do know from procedural generated aspects of it is going to be there. The vibe I got is that not everything is going to be this fully realized thing. There's going to be some resourcey kind of planets, you know what I'm saying? And stuff where there's not. But what I have to admit, what you touched on with Mass Effect 1, even though I'm a Mass Effect 2 guy at heart, the Mass Effect 1 guys, I always give them, there is something about the sense of exploration. And even if you're on that rickety Mako and you found the ruin, right? There was an excitement that maybe it launched something, and maybe you have a quest line, and then you get something like Bring Down the Sky. And if they could do enough of that, because I don't expect those worlds to be fully, realized in the capacity that, the other worlds are going to be. I think there'll be their major systems, their major planets that'll get you along through the course of the narrative. And then everything else is kind of like at your discretion. I think, and the last point I'll say is probably the modding community. And that's what Matty's kind of educating me with the whole, the settlement system, and I want to see how they play on that. But yeah, I agree. There are questions there, but it's still something about the space, man, the frontier. It always gets me, man. And being able to travel on land and over the atmosphere, it's ambitious for sure.
It looks cool, man.
We have to see if that's
when I was watching the gameplay reveal and all of that, and their kind of deep dive into it, and then I wasn't online at the time, but then I went back and I was reading stuff, and a lot of people were shitting on it. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like this looks.
Don't get me started.
I'm like, what did you expect? It's a Bethesda game. It's going to look like a Bethesda game. You either like that or you don't. That's your starting point. And then,
exactly.
But I'm like, I think this looks cool as hell. Anyway, Matty, what's your most anticipated game? It doesn't have to be this year or anything like that if you don't want it to be. But
yeah. I mean, because like this year, I'm like out of morbid curiosity, very excited for Sonic Frontiers. Like I just got to know. I just got to know, right? I've been.
You don't understand it.
A side venture here. Like my Retro Rebound YouTube channel has been doing really well. And hilariously, one of the things that's done really well there is Sonic. I've had to play a lot of Sonic games just to, like, because people just want to hear my thoughts as someone who doesn't like Sonic, like what I thought of Sonic Adventure 1, playing it for the first time, so on and so forth. So now that I've really familiarized myself with these games, I'm just like, this year, I'm just like, what's going on with Frontiers? Like, what's the business here? Because the Nintendo Switch trailer looked good. So we'll see. But really, if I were to, I couldn't put my finger on something this year I'm very excited for, because everything I was very excited for, Elden Ring and TMNT, it's out. So,
man, and isn't TMNT so good? I just want to reiterate that. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah.
Top 3 game of the year for me right now.
Love letter. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah, a lot of the stuff, like I'm looking forward to games, but really nothing excited. Maybe when I get closer, something like High on Life is what I'm looking forward to. But like, if I were to pick ones that like most anticipated, I'm with Cog, Starfield. I'm BGS stand through and through. I love their games. They really haven't had one outside of 76 that I've not been a fan of. So for me, it's like this feeling of guaranteed enjoyment. And especially because with Starfield, I feel like it's sort of created this perspective where I look back at Fallout 4, a game I think of pretty positively for the most part. But I kind of look at differently now, where I thought, maybe that was the cap of their ambition. And now I see Starfield and I'm like, you guys could do so much more, and you actually finally are, and makes you feel foolish in hindsight, because I'm like, that was a game that maybe got a freer pass than I should have gave it, because they certainly are showing what they're really capable of now, and answering a lot of calls that, as someone who's like deeply entrenched in that community, people have wanted. The no voice protagonists, more role playing, single player only, real choice and consequence, so on and so forth. So it for me, it just is answering everything I want. Plus, as Cog said, the Mass Effect vibes. I'm less concerned than others about the 1,000 planets, because Bethesda's used procedural generated content since Morrowind. Like, that's how they generate all the terrain in their world. So I think, to me, it's nothing different here. They're just splitting it up across what is effectively multiple maps in the game. So yeah, some will be empty, but I think the benefit of that is hopefully Bethesda fills out a decent amount of them where the game feels full and lush with content that's worthwhile. But that if it's not, I mean, modders can literally build full games on these respective planets, and that's going to be unlike anything we've seen before. So Starfield most anticipated, but really, God, throw it to PlayStation, man. KOTOR remake. I mean, come on now. Like, this is the one I've been begging for years. I've seen a little bit of it. I like what I saw. So, I feel pretty good about this one. I think Aspire tapping Saber Interactive on the shoulder was really wise. I think Saber's a very reliable team. I think Embracer kind of understands what they're working with here and have been very careful with things. And yeah, I mean, as much as I love KOTOR, this is a game that I understand as time goes on, it's not very favorable to that game, and things like combat start to fall apart. Its story and writing never truly does. Its music doesn't. Things like exploration, I'd love to see open up. Side quests, I'd love to see develop further. So there's a lot of potential in this remake, and the people who are working on it, I'm pretty excited about because a lot of them are like ex-BioWare talent. And a lot of the team heading it seems to understand and have a love for Star Wars, generally speaking, because they're responsible for why all these old Star Wars games from like the early 2000s are on modern consoles. Like, they wanted to make all of them possible to play, even down to like Republic Commando. So those are the two I'm just really looking forward to. When I think about games I'm excited about, it's those two that undoubtedly I'm going to be geeking out over when they finally come out.
Awesome. I'm excited too. As far as KOTOR is concerned, it's interesting because I have such a fond memory of buying my Xbox for that game in 2003. That was when I got my Xbox, and that game was pretty revolutionary. I never played a game like that before as a console first gamer. Something more
same.
It was turn-based, kind of stilted role playing, but it's immersive, and I don't know. I'd never really encountered anything like that before. And I was tasked with writing the strategy guide for IGN for it, and I ended up not being able to beat it because I was not my guy was like not powerful enough, but I was caught at the end, and so someone had to like fight whoever the fuck you fight at the end. And that's what I remember about it the most. All right,
I will not spoil it.
Yeah, Chris, what game or games are you most looking forward to?
Dude, man, nothing holds a candle to Skull and Bones.
Yeah,
I'm stoked about Skull and Bones. No, I think Plague Tale Requiem has me really sincerely excited because that was it's Innocence is the first one. The new Plague Tale is really exciting to me just because the first one surprised me a lot. I didn't think it was the exact kind of game that I thought I would hate. It was like, oh, it's like an escort mission and it's French, but it turned out really great. Like, I really genuinely loved it, and I'm excited at the thought of what they could do with a bigger scope, more ambition, and just less. I am a little bit concerned because the first game was very stealth oriented, which is something that I love. I love stealth. And this one seems a little bit like you have a little bit more power. You seem to be armed. You have like a crossbow and stuff. So you don't seem as helpless, which could be cool. But at the same time, like I hope they strike a good balance with that. But beyond that, I think Starfield's a big one. I think Callisto Protocol is a huge one. That's the one. Those are ones that I'm excited about. Obviously, I'll always be excited for the next Destiny expansion because I'm hooked in at this point. But I think
catharsis.
Yeah, but I think the top those are the ones that are on my mind. But I think I'm super super stoked about Callisto. Like that's the one that I'm like I want. If this really is. Yeah, like every time I see it, I'm just like I love what I'm seeing. The dude who there's this playthrough recently that I saw, and I think it's in like a trailer or something, but dude just falls into it's like a clandestine factory accident. Like it doesn't even feel like, oh, you got killed by a monster. No, you just fell into like a spinny machine and ended up on Live Leak. And that's like that's it. I love that. It looks gruesome. It looks violent. It looks sincerely atmospheric. And I'm just stoked about it. If it can even reach half as good as Dead Space 1 was for that time, then we're in for something really cool. And we got the Dead Space remake a month after that. So I'm eating good, I think, for the next few months.
4 months after when it comes out in April, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Dude, Callisto Protocol, I'm done. I don't want to see any more of the game. I'm not going to watch anything else from it. I'm in
Same.
that space with a lot of games now, and I thought it looked absolutely amazing. I couldn't believe it. I'm so excited. I'm especially excited, like we said, that they're severing it from PUBG as like a universal constant, which is good because it can be its own thing potentially. Why tether it to this thing unnecessarily? In fact, you can just go the other way if you want, but you can never really undo that connection. So I think they're smart to do that. Dustin, what are your most anticipated games?
I think overall, most anticipated is Final Fantasy 16. Of course, it's got to be. I mean, right now, I think the thing that kind of put me over the edge with that is just that they basically said that they are mostly done with the game now, and it is releasing in 1 year, which is like, to me, that's awesome. I mean, as much as I would love to play it this year or early next year, the thought of this super polished out the gate Final Fantasy game that from fans of Final Fantasy 14 are like, this is it. This is the one. Trust this man and this team. This is like full confidence. That gives me a lot of hope. So I'm really excited about that game. And more lately, I'm wondering if we're going to hear about whatever this title is from Software, because apparently it's done or very close to being done. So
Armored Core 6 or whatever it's
potentially, potentially Armored Core or something like that, or maybe a
Bloodborne.
return to Sekiro would be cool as well. I mean,
No.
the options are unlimited. So those are the two things that are percolating right now for me.
Cool, man.
What if it's Elden Ring 3 because they forgot that they put Elden Ring 2 out in Elden Ring
Right.
already?
Yeah.
Because that game's so
They do have
damn
the
big.
upper world and the lower world. So
What did they do recently? Goat Simulator? Didn't they just skip a second?
Yeah.
And they just became
Oh,
released
yeah.
Goat
They just
Simulator
did
3 or something like that.
Yeah.
That's funny. I think that's pretty funny.
It's evil.
All right. So for me, I wrote down a few games. Just first of all, I agree with pretty much what everyone said. I mean, games like Final Fantasy 16, Dead Space, of course, remake. I would give a shout out to so more near games. I think it's coming out in the not near NIER, but near NEAR games coming out soon. That Klonoa collection comes out this week, and I'm kind of excited to check that out. It looks pretty cool. Stray looks awesome, and that's finally going to come out, I think, in July or August.
Oh, yeah,
I'm kind of low key excited for Saints Row. I just want to play a zany open world game. I don't think that game looks bad at all. I think people are just kind of hating. And speaking of haters, fuck the haters. The Last of Us Part 1. I'm going to be all over that game when it comes out. Star Ocean, I might check out this fall as well. Crisis Core Reunion looks pretty good. Although I heard that they've made it into a menu based game, which is surprising because it was an action game. So I want to see that. Hogwarts Legacy looks awesome. I heard a long time ago, before they announced that it was coming out this year, I heard that it wasn't coming out this year. I don't know if that's still true. I think they're kind of running out of room to announce a date over the next couple of months, so we'll see. And then River City Girls 2. I just wanted to give a shout out to that because that looks awesome. That Square Enix strategy role-playing game, Diofield Chronicles, looks pretty cool. And finally, Resident Evil 4 Remake, which is 8 months away, I think now. Can't wait. Ooh,
yeah,
boy.
Square Enix is going hard with JRPGs this year.
Oh yeah,
really
dude.
Look at it.
They are. I mean, they have Live Alive or whatever
this month.
coming soon, which is, I think, coming only to Switch. See, they're playing some games with the Switch, which I appreciate, but it annoys me. It's like, I want that shit on PlayStation as well. And then they do something like what do they bring? Octopath Traveler?
Octopath to Xbox,
Yeah.
and PC. It's weird.
Which is interesting. So
weird.
yeah, very interesting. They're experimenting. But boys, that was fun. I appreciate you guys. Of course, thank you guys out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Last Stand Media, Sacred Symbols, Defining Duke. Check those out. But of course, check out everyone's individual stuff as well. Dustin, you're streaming on Twitch. What have you been streaming recently?
I've not been streaming. I'm working on a new project.
Oh, I didn't know that.
In the works.
What is it? Can we can't talk about it?
I can't tell. I'm not going to talk about it yet. No,
because it's a
I'm
secret.
not. I got to make
Keep your
sure.
cards close to your chest. Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to work out, so I don't want to.
Fair enough.
Mention it. Yet,
okay, well, good. We'll give you good energies then, Chris. Of course.
Yeah.
Finally, putting content up. I've noticed, which is interesting.
Yeah. About time.
Good for you. So go check that out. And are you streaming these days? You are, right? I check.
Yeah, and obviously not while I'm here, but like, yeah, when I get back, it'll be a full schedule again. And I'm also working on a very long Halo TV show video, so that'll be out. That'll be out when it's out.
Cool, man.
We'll
look forward to it. Cog, of course, the Iron Lords. How's everything in your neck of the woods creatively?
Yeah, Doing good, man. Doing good. Just talking to devs and trying to get information as much as we can and on some of the favorite games that's going out. I've been messing around with the developers of Interior Night As Dusk Falls. So look out for some more content from them, kind of on a narrative based in a Telltale vein, but a little twist with a cooperative experience to get non-gamers into it. And it also can be used through the cloud and the phone. So it definitely surprised me. I came in with a lower expectation. I'm like, okay, no, they may have something. So look, be on the lookout for some stuff and content with that.
Cool, man. And finally, Matty, you have your dueling YouTube channels. Everything seems to be going well. Actually, I was looking at your, I don't know which channel it was. I was like, holy shit, these are doing great numbers. I think it might have been Retro Rebound, but I don't know.
Yeah,
but
it depends what era of gaming we're talking about. Was it anything that's come out in the last year? Because
I don't know. It was amazing. I was like, holy shit, you're doing great work. So congratulations on that. Because I'm not.
Thank you.
My algorithm on YouTube, like I don't ever really search for anything. It just kind of feeds me things. Once in a while, I'll search for things.
Fed to you? Is that what's happening?
So yeah, you kind of popped in because I don't watch very many video game things, but since we were doing Ocarina of Time on Knockback, I don't like watching things and hearing things and then like kind of absorbing it. I like to kind of come to things fresh. But when I'm done covering something, I'm like, okay, cool. So I've been going down this Ocarina of Time rabbit hole with these like 2-hour long iceberg videos. I'm sure people know about them.
Oh yeah,
and they're insane. They're completely insane. And then I've been getting fed like Pokemon shit and all that. But then your videos came up or started getting.
Yeah, that had to be Retro Rebound.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. So it introduced that way. So yeah, that's how I saw. But it's like, man, YouTube's probably so confused because it's like, does this guy's watching like Karen compilations, like renegade pedophile catcher videos, this guy called the Cart Narcs that goes and embarrasses people for not bringing their shopping carts back. And like
I love
QVC.
watching fist fight videos.
Oh yeah, fist fight. Yeah, fight.
I get so amped.
Oh, they're awesome. I watch, dude. There's one I have to recommend. There's this guy in Austin, Texas. I got to find it, but it's like all in 4K. It's amazing. Like I don't know how he catches them like this. He goes like downtown in Austin, I guess, like when the shit's getting crazy, and he just happens to catch things. And it's like, it's amazing. It's like we're watching a goddamn IMAX. It's incredible. Anyway, I don't know how we got off on this tangent. My friends, thank you for your time. Thank you all out there for your love and kindness. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.